Hello everyone, I am a storyteller and today I am here to help you. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. It was a normal night. At least, it seemed that way at first. The clock ticked, the moon hung in the sky, casting pale shadows that seemed to last longer than usual. There was something unusual tonight, something lingering around, just within the reach of awareness, but impossible to touch, yet undeniably present. The house that Eric rented, an old structure on the edge of town, had a life of its own, as if a living organism, waiting for someone to enter its lap. Eric, a weary traveler, arrived in this small town late at night, seeking it out for a quiet place, a place to escape the demands of the world. The simple house he rented, located on a winding road, away from the main square, was an ideal place for someone to be isolated from the outside world. But from the moment he stepped in, he felt something was wrong, even though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. The walls, with their peeling wallpaper, and the floor creaking underfoot, were as if this house had a mind of its own, aware of his presence. A musty smell hung in the air, and a heavy silence filled the air. The kind of silence where you can't breathe, like it's pressing down on your chest. Eric is no stranger to old, run-down houses. His job as an information technology analyst takes him to strange and sometimes creepy places, abandoned offices, old warehouses, deserted storage rooms. But there's no place like this house. The air felt here, as if it was squeezing him, wanting to swallow him. The first sign that something was wrong came when Eric received a strange text message. At first, this message seemed harmless, but when he read it carefully, something made him think. The text message accurately described an action he had just done, something he had just thought about. The hairs on his neck stood up as he looked at the phone screen, a cold feeling running down his spine. How could anyone know what he did? At first, Eric tried to ignore it. It could be a joke, a prank from a coworker, or it could be a technical problem. But as the night wore on, the messages continued, each time more detailed. It wasn't long before Eric realized he was no longer alone in this house. Someone, or something, was following him. The house started to come alive with each passing minute. Light footsteps, rustling curtains, cold space. Eric felt like something was lurking in the darkness, watching his every move. It wasn't until late at night that Eric truly understood what was happening. He went back to his room to rest, trying to get rid of the feeling of anxiety surrounding him. But can't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw shadows in the room, heard light footsteps on the floor. And there was something, someone, right in the room with him. Suddenly, his room door opened. The door creaked. Slowly. On purpose. Eric stood still, unable to move. He wanted to scream, but couldn't make a sound. The door opened wide, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw a figure standing there, tall, shrouded in darkness, but when he looked closely, there was nothing left. Just a dark space. Then there was the sound of knocking. At first it was very soft, as if someone were gently tapping on the door. That knocking sound became increasingly clear, non-stop, echoing in space. The feeling of coldness engulfs me and I can't escape. During the following hours, Eric gradually lost his reason. The noises, shadows, and strange objects in the house made him unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. The messages kept coming, describing his every move, as if the sender was right next to him. Eric can't escape, trapped in a game he doesn't understand. He tried to leave, but the front door wouldn't open. He tried calling for help, but his phone was dead, the battery drained, as if the house had sucked all the energy from it. There's nowhere to escape. The noises in the house became creepy. Strange footsteps. The winds are inexplicable. And there was something moving in the darkness, visible but impossible to touch. The final night came, and Eric could no longer tell whether he was still awake or not. The house seemed to swallow him whole, and the air was now heavy and unbearable. The messages stopped, but the presence continued to increase. It is in every corner of the house, in every shadow, in every sound. It never leaves. Then finally, at midnight, the figure appeared again. This time it wasn't darkness anymore, it was real. A tall figure stood at the door, its features obscured in darkness. Eric tried to call, tried to scream, but there was no sound. He saw his phone, but when he was about to touch it, it was too late. The next morning, when the town woke up, Eric was gone. The house was empty, the door wide open, as if the house had been waiting for him to leave. But no one knew where he went, and no one dared to step inside. The house remains silent, the secrets in it are still hidden. However, the messages continued to arrive. For those who dare to enter that house, they will receive messages detailing their every move, as if the house is still watching, waiting for the next victim. When Eric woke up the next morning, he no longer felt the same quietness as before. This house, which he previously thought was simple, now looks like an invisible maze, a place containing too many undiscovered secrets. He began to notice cracks in the walls, inexplicable shadows from the windows, doors that suddenly opened and closed for no apparent reason. Even the curtains, which he thought were harmless, now moved in an invisible dance, as if controlled by some force. Every time he dared to step out of the room, he felt invisible eyes following his every step. Strange noises came from other rooms, strange whispers as if someone was calling his name from the darkness. Even though he tried to banish that feeling, it still haunted him, making his heart beat fast and hard, as if someone was chasing him. He decided to try something, check his phone. But, when he opened the screen, he received a new message, detailing every action he had just done. This message even described thoughts he had never shared with anyone, making him feel like he was no longer in control of his own actions. The messages became more continuous, non-stop. They not only describe Eric's actions but also make predictions about what will happen next. It felt like someone lived in his mind, understanding better than he did every thought and every decision he made. Gradually, the truth begins to reveal itself. This house is no ordinary house. It is a place where a mysterious force exists, controlling what happens around. Eric could not find any signs that he could escape. Every time I try to leave the house, the front door never opens. Every time he stepped out into the hallway, the light seemed to grow weaker, and strange noises echoed, as if this house was swallowing him inside. At night, he couldn't remember clearly what he did. The blurry images, the dark shadows, the soft whispers, all made him feel like he was lost in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. On the final night, when everything seems to be spiraling out of control, Eric has only one choice left: to face the thing that haunts him head-on. He tormented himself, trying to find a reasonable reason for all the strange phenomena happening in this house, but the more he searched, the more he felt himself mired in horror and unable to escape. The house had become a living entity, as if it wanted to swallow him whole. Every time he tried to rest, the nightmares came. The messages, the strange silhouettes, all create a haunting dance that cannot be stopped. Finally, in one of his darkest moments, Eric decided to face the truth. He walked into the bathroom and looked into the mirror, where his reflection seemed strangely distorted. And then, from deep inside, he heard a laugh. A soft, cold laugh came from behind me. When he returned, he found he was no longer himself. He has been replaced by a ghost, an unrecognizable figure. Everything in the house became blurry, and space seemed to slow down, stretching endlessly. He was no longer sure if he was real or not. The fatigue lasted all night, but sleep still could not come. Even though Eric's eyes wanted to close and his tired body wanted to give up, the noises in the house kept ringing non-stop. The sound of the wind rushing through the door, the floor creaking under every step, and the thick silence like a cold fog covering the space. This feeling, this vague yet very real fear, did not leave him for a second. His eyes scanned the dark shadows in the room. Distorted images appeared like ghosts hovering next to the corner of the wall. The whole room seemed to be moving. The curtains, which had been standing quietly, were now waving strangely even though there was no wind. The dark corners of the room looked as if something was hiding there, waiting to reveal itself. The atmosphere seemed heavier. Eric's every breath seemed to become a gasp, as heavy as a nightmare. Something has changed in this house. Everything begins to become hazy. The images cannot be clearly identified, but they have one thing in common. They all make Eric feel that he is no longer alone. A cold feeling enveloped him from the inside out, enveloping him as if someone was watching from behind, looking at his every move. Eric couldn't remember clearly what he was doing at that time, but when he woke up, he noticed that everything around him had changed. The house, once quiet, was now filled with eeriness. The walls, once strong, now seemed ready to collapse. The floor shook under every step, as if this house was trembling, afraid of something approaching. Before he could think any more, Eric received another text message. This time, the message not only described his actions, but also made strange predictions about what he would do next. It was like a whisper from an incomprehensible force, controlling him from behind the darkness. It felt as if there was some link between him and something invisible but real. He tried to avoid it, but couldn't. From the darkness, noises began to sound, a light tapping on the window, then a rustling of curtains, then a cold breath of air wafting into the space. At this point, Eric began to feel scared, really scared. Not just because of those messages, but because of something else, a presence that couldn't be seen, but could be clearly felt. The figures in the room began to become clearer, as if they were moving, invading the space around him. One night, when moonlight flooded through the window, Eric noticed a dark shadow flashing outside the window. He rushed over and lifted the curtain, but there was nothing. Just a quiet space, as if the house had absorbed all the sounds and movements of the outside world. At this point, he couldn't deny that something strange was going on in this house. Another night, while Eric was reading a book in his room, suddenly the mirror on the wall reflected an impossible image, the image of a person standing behind him, but when he turned around, there was no one. Eric's heart was pounding, a cold feeling rose in his body. He didn't dare look into the mirror anymore, but deep down, he could feel the presence of something else, an inexplicable observation, staring at him from the darkness. Unable to escape the feeling of being watched, Eric walked to the door, but once again, footsteps in the house echoed behind him. At this point, he could not distinguish between reality and illusions. His mind was confused, tension was rising, as if he was caught up in a game that he couldn't control. Finally, the night has finally come. The night where all truths will be revealed. Eric no longer tried to explain, no longer tried to leave. He knew that this house was not simply an old house but a place containing something different. A force that he couldn't see, but felt clearly. And then, in the dark night, when he decided to face what haunted him, a figure appeared. A tall, shadowy figure stood right next to the room door. Didn't say a word, just stood there, staring at him. Eric's eyes couldn't leave that shadow, even though he knew clearly that the truth was near, but he couldn't do anything. A cold feeling gradually enveloped me as I walked through the dark hallway, the light of the fluorescent lights flickering continuously, as if reflecting a strange illusion in space. My shoes echoed on the floor, the sound echoed, creating a terrifying silence, as if it were revealing every step I took. The air was stuffy, a mix of old carpet mold and an unidentifiable smell that made my throat tight. As I walked to the server room located in a hidden corner, a sound echoed from above, where the stairs led to the top floor. It was a distinct thud, like someone dropping a heavy box from above. I stopped, feeling my heart clench. It doesn't feel right, something isn't right. The thud sounded again, this time the rhythm was like footsteps, going back and forth. I tried to reassure myself, thinking it was just the creaking of ancient architecture or maybe the building's ventilation system. But even though my mind tried to explain, my heart couldn't stop beating faster. I had to stop, take a deep breath, to regain my composure. After finishing restarting the server, I hurried out of the room. But just as I walked through the door, another noise rang out, this time the door upstairs slamming shut. That echo made the whole building seem to shake, echoing down the stairs like a powerful impact. There was a tight feeling in my stomach, my body tensed, sweat began to form at my temples. I felt like running away, but my instincts told me to stay calm. This was a building that was supposed to be empty at this hour, no one was scheduled to enter that floor, and security must have locked the doors a long time ago. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that someone, or something, had just slammed that door. I tried to console myself that maybe the wind was blowing through some window. But when I looked along the hallway, the windows were all closed, without a gap. That made my heart feel even more indescribable. Unable to bear it any longer, I quickly turned off the lights in the server room and quickly went downstairs. Suddenly, a feeling of panic rose within me. I couldn't explain why, but something made me uneasy. The overhead lights began to flicker, just once, but enough to make me feel like I was standing in a dark room where everything was watching my every move. The flickering light again made me feel as if someone was standing at the end of the hallway, a faint, impossibly tall figure. I couldn't see anything clearly, just the presence of a dark shadow, waiting in silence. My heart was beating so hard that I couldn't breathe. The feeling of extreme suffocation made me want to run away, but I couldn't move. I could only stand there, my eyes wide open, trying to see the figure clearly, but I couldn't see anything but empty space. When the light gradually stabilized, everything returned to a strange peace, but the figure had disappeared. I breathed a sigh of relief, as if everything was just my imagination, but that insecurity did not let me go. I hurriedly left the building, the feeling of panic still clinging to every step, refusing to look back. Leaving the building, the feeling of insecurity still stuck with me. That night, I couldn't sleep, my eyes kept opening, staring at the darkness. Every sound, no matter how small, startled me. And then I realized, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Even though the building had fallen silent, it still haunted me like a monster that never slept. The next morning, I went back to the building, but everything was still the same. However, I cannot forget that strange feeling, a feeling that I cannot explain. That building, that house, it's not just an ordinary building. It contained something I couldn't see, but I knew for sure that it was real. Those invisible ghosts, those inexplicable noises, all of those things entered my mind, making it impossible for me to forget. I don't know if anyone was actually there, or if so, what they were waiting for. But one thing I am sure of is that I cannot forget the silence that night. Everything doesn't just stop in that house. They continued to follow me, even though I had been out of there for a long time. After leaving the building in a state of near panic, I tried to regain my composure. Even though I had walked quite a distance from that area, the feeling of someone watching me did not disappear. It felt like I was still in that building, monitored by something invisible but extremely obvious. The light on the street cannot dispel the darkness that covers my mind. A day later, I decided to go back, not out of curiosity, but because I couldn't forget what happened that night. The building still stood there, silent as if nothing had happened, but I knew clearly, something had changed in me and in that house. I decided to go in. When I entered, the air inside was colder and heavier than ever. The musty smell still lingered, but now, I could clearly feel another presence. Dark shadows seemed to be moving, creeping through dark corners. There was a chilling unease, a feeling as if this very house was watching me. Entering the building, I noticed everything was still the same. Empty rooms and quiet hallways. But as I walked down the hallway, I heard a strange sound. This time, it wasn't a thud or footsteps, but a very small, very soft whisper, as if someone was calling my name from afar. I stopped, my eyes wide open, tense and not daring to move. That whisper became clearer and clearer, as if it was coming closer to me. A cold feeling ran down my spine. I turned around, but there was nothing but darkness. I tried to reassure myself, saying it was just the imagination of someone who was too stressed. But that call, no matter how small, still haunts me. I didn't dare take another step, but an inexplicable urge pulled me towards the source of the sound. Quietly walking through the dark hallways, I approached the server room where I first felt something was wrong. The door to the server room was still open, but when I entered, the light suddenly went out. A large black shadow, unable to be clearly defined, suddenly appeared at the back of the room. I couldn't say anything, my body seemed frozen, my eyes were open but I couldn't see clearly. The light returned, and the shadow disappeared. But I couldn't forget that image, it was so clear, so real, that I couldn't lie to myself. It felt like someone was standing near me, but when I turned around, there was no one. There is only darkness, only silence. A noise rang out from behind, the door closing. I turned around and walked quickly towards it, but when I looked into the small room, I only saw active servers. However, one thing cannot be denied, I am no longer alone. I started to feel like this house was a living entity. It seemed to be sensing me, watching and reacting to my every move. Every step, every small gesture made me feel like I was being watched by an invisible, yet extremely present force. The whole building is no longer as quiet as before. The doors cannot open on their own, the walls are no longer silent. Occasionally, I heard noises from empty rooms, but when I opened the door, there was only darkness and silence. However, there is one thing I cannot deny, this house is not the same as before. It has life, has its own rhythm, an existence that I cannot understand. One day, when I returned to my office, my phone suddenly vibrated. I don't remember when I turned it on, but when I looked at the screen, messages started appearing. The first is a brief, one-line message, "I'm looking at you." My whole body felt paralyzed, unable to speak. This was followed by longer messages, each describing an action I took throughout that day. I've never talked to anyone about these things, but the sender seems to know my every move. Those messages were not simply descriptions but also made predictions about what I would do next. I can't bear it anymore. It feels like the house is clinging to me, not letting me leave. The messages continued to come, the whispers still echoed in my head. I cannot live in this insecurity any longer. When night fell, I decided to face it all. I went back to where it all started, the server room, where all the strange phenomena happened. At this moment, there was no longer fear in me, only determination. I entered the room, holding the flashlight firmly in my hand, illuminating everywhere. At that moment, the light went out. I heard a very soft noise, like a whisper, very close. Turning around, I saw a faint figure standing in front of the door. But when the light returned, there was no one there. That's when I understood that the house contained more than just darkness. It consumed my mind, step by step. And I am no longer the only one here. The feeling of not being able to sleep made my mind tired, but thoughts kept racing in my head. Is that number a trick of my mind? I was exhausted, but couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I told myself I needed to rest, to let old ghost stories not take over my thoughts. But the next day, when I shared with a colleague what I thought I had seen, the story became even more confusing. She recounted rumors some employees had told about a dark presence, a tall dark figure they had glimpsed in the building. She describes it as a long shadow that lurks near the corners of the hallway, always watching but never getting close to anyone. A feeling of nausea rose within me as I listened to her speak, because the details were too obvious to be dismissed as an illusion. I couldn't help it, and part of me was ready to accept that everything might actually be real. During the next week, every time I had to work late, fear appeared like an inevitable feeling. My palms sweat every time I step into the hallway, and the hum of the fluorescent lights makes me feel even more uncomfortable. Work required me to stay longer, as some checks on the old servers had to be done in the evening so as not to disrupt the day's operations. But that old hardware was right on a floor that everyone avoided, and I couldn't deny that it made me feel very uneasy. When I stood facing the elevator door, I hesitated again, staring at it for a long time. In the end, I decided to take the stairs instead of entering a closed metal box, which made me feel much more vulnerable. Every step I took, I felt strange and scared, but I knew I couldn't give up. My steps on the stairs increased the feeling of insecurity, like each step was a decision that could change everything. Almost every night that I stayed in the building, small inaudible noises seemed to become terrible sounds in the silence. A small crack here, a metallic groan there, everything could be missed in the silence of the night, but there were times when I couldn't help but hear heavy footsteps from above me. Those steps had a clear rhythm, as if someone was walking around the top floor. Each time, my heart sank and I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the sound to stop. That feeling lasted, making me feel helpless and weak. But when the silence reigns, that's the scariest thing. It was quiet, but it wasn't a normal quiet. It felt like a dense void, as if something was waiting for my next heartbeat. One night, when I could no longer bear the loneliness and insecurity, I tried to persuade a colleague to go upstairs with me for company. She insisted that she was too busy with her own work and couldn't go with me. I almost begged her, but she still refused. In the end, I had to go alone, even though I knew in my heart that it was not a safe choice. I remember gripping the stair railing so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The hallway light flickered again, but this time I felt the light no longer relieved my fear. Actually, it made me feel even more like there was a dark shadow watching me from afar. I tried to go faster, but it felt like an invisible hand was pulling me back, not letting me escape this tension. With every step I took, I heard the noise get louder and louder, as if someone was following me. That feeling surrounded me. I didn't dare turn around, but my eyes still couldn't help but look toward the darkness behind. A dark shadow stood there, quietly, unmoving, as if waiting for something. I couldn't control myself anymore. It felt like I was being pulled into something, an irresistible pull. The noises did not stop, but only became clearer and clearer. I feel like I'm not walking in an old building anymore, but entering another space, where time no longer maintains its rules. It felt like something was following me, following every step. I could almost hear its breathing, heavy and steady. My heart was racing, and I couldn't do anything but keep walking. Every time I stop, I feel as if the darkness is swallowing me. I tried to stop and calm myself, but it didn't help. My footsteps continued to echo in the quiet space, while strange sounds echoed from behind. I know that I'm not alone here. This house is not simply a place to hide, but a hidden hell. It's swallowing me up little by little. Intellectually, I knew that those shadows and noises couldn't be real, but this feeling was very real. Every time I walked through the hallway, I felt an invisible pair of eyes watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. Every crack in the wall, every shadow in the room, they seemed to be alive, as if they were watching me. After each night of work, I gradually lost the ability to distinguish between reality and illusion. The building began to change in my eyes. Details I once considered normal were now monstrous. The walls seemed to breathe, the floor not only creaked but also echoed as if someone was moving underneath. Even doors, even though locked, can open for no reason. Everything I thought I understood about this house was distorted in every moment. I tried going back during the day, trying to escape the strange urges of the night, but the feeling still stuck with me. When I entered the building in the morning, I thought I would feel relieved, but that was not the case. Every step I took made me feel forced to turn back, as if an invisible force was pulling me back into the darkness of last night. One day, while repairing an old piece of equipment on a high floor, I discovered a room I had never seen before. The door was blocked by a pile of old furniture, covered in dust. But curiosity made me irresistible. I cleaned up my things and opened the door. The room was small, dark, and dusty. The pictures on the wall were broken, old torn papers were scattered on the floor. But one thing that stopped me was a large wall at the back of the room. It is not an ordinary wall. It was hidden by a layer of wooden planks, and from the gap between the planks, I could see a dim light glinting. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't help myself. I decided to open the panel, and when I did, a blast of cold air hit my face. In that moment, I felt as if I had opened a door between two worlds, a world that didn't belong to me, but one I couldn't go back to. Behind that wall is a strange space. This space is unlike any other room in the building. The smell of mold and mildew became stronger than ever, and the air felt thick, making it difficult to breathe. I walked in and saw a large mirror, tucked away in the corner of the room. The reflections in the mirror were so distorted that I couldn't recognize myself. That's not me, or at least, that's not what I think I am. A feeling of panic took over me, and I couldn't take my eyes off of myself in the mirror. Suddenly, I saw a black shadow standing right behind me, darkness covering the entire space. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and immediately, I felt something looking at me from behind. A soft sound, like a whisper, passed through my ears, "Run. I can't stand still anymore." It felt like someone was standing nearby, just waiting for me to make a mistake and get closer. I rushed out of that room, but when I turned back to look at the space behind me, I saw that shadow again, growing larger and getting closer. My steps were quick, my heart was beating wildly, and I couldn't stop. When I turned back to look, that black shadow was no longer just a faint silhouette. It became an entity, standing right in my room, lifeless eyes watching me. But as I stared at it, something strange happened. The shadow seemed to vanish into thin air, as if it were just an illusion. A few weeks later, I realized something strange. The messages I had previously received not only described my actions but also talked about the people around me. People who weren't present at that time, but knew everything about me. It seemed like something existed in the darkness, controlling and monitoring my every move. And I realized that I wasn't just haunted by the shadows in this building. Maybe this house is monitoring all of us, controlling everything from the shadows, and I'm just one of those trapped in the game. Every night, I try to let go of that feeling of fear, but it always follows me. No matter how hard I tried to banish the obsessions from my mind, they kept coming back, stronger, clearer. I couldn't escape, couldn't control the feeling that something was watching me from every corner. Sometimes, I hear footsteps, but when I turn around, it's just a dark, seemingly untouchable darkness. When I went upstairs, where I felt safest, things became strange again. Every time I walked into what I thought was a normal room, I saw dark shadows hovering around. It seemed like they were just waiting for me, stalking every moment I showed weakness. Every time I look in the mirror, I no longer see my reflection. I saw another shadow, another person standing behind me, his face distorted, his eyes strange. I quickly turned away, but that black shadow was still there, following me into every space I went to. The long sleepless nights made me more confused than ever. Each fluorescent light becomes dimmer, no longer as bright as before. In the dark space, I could not clearly identify which silhouettes were real and which were illusions. Every time I step out of the room, I feel like someone is standing in the dark, just waiting for me to leave so I can get closer. The door behind me never fully closes. Sometimes, I could hear the gentle squeak of the hinge, as if someone was gently pushing it open. Each time, I rushed back to check, but there was nothing, just darkness and silence. But I know that something is waiting. I don't dare go near any mirrors anymore. After seeing a strange shadow in the room, I felt that each mirror contained a terrifying truth that I could not face. The image reflected in the mirror is not me anymore. They are other things, shadows that cannot be clearly defined. One night, I decided to face this fear again. I cannot live forever in this worry and insecurity. I returned to the building, hoping to find answers to the questions that had long plagued me. I decided to go to the locked room I had seen before, where perhaps, the answers would be revealed. When I opened the door, the air in the room suffocated me. A wave of cold air swept over me, and the silence became suffocating. The walls surrounding this room are not just walls, they seem to be alive, their breathing mingles with mine. I walked in, my eyes following every detail in this dark space. A large mirror was placed in the corner of the room. The dim light from the only flickering lamp reflected a distorted image in it. I moved closer, but didn't dare look straight into the mirror. I only saw a dim light in there, something, standing behind me. I quickly turned around, but there was no one. It's just me, alone in the room. My heart beats faster. At this moment, I realized that not only was the house watching me, but some force was manipulating my mind, forcing me to face incomprehensible things. I started to realize that I was no longer myself. Strange dreams, ghostly images, they all seemed to be blending together, not distinguishing between what is real and what is an illusion. I feel like I'm being dragged into a never-ending nightmare. Those noises, those strange shadows, all had one thing in common. They all wanted me to go deeper into the darkness, into a world of no return. Another night, I decided I would not return to this building again. I tried to stop, but the urge grew stronger. I was too close to turn back. I can't ignore the whispers in the dark, the strange invitations that I can't get rid of. I don't know if I can leave here or not, but one thing I know for sure, I did not escape that surveillance. This house is still there, always following me. I used to think that I could escape that obsession, but that was not the case. I'm not myself anymore. Sleepless nights have turned me into a pale shadow, no longer clearly feeling my own existence. That building, that haunted house, still followed me like a predator, and I was the inescapable prey. Every time I think I'm past it, it pulls me back. Last night, when I had just returned from a business trip, I walked into my room, and a strange feeling enveloped me. It was not ordinary fear, but extreme confusion. It felt like something was waiting for me in the room. It's not just the darkness I usually see. It was a clear presence, as if someone was standing right in the room, silently looking at me. I tried to convince myself that it was just fatigue, stress, but as soon as I touched the door, a loud noise rang out behind me. Footsteps, heavy and clear, as if someone was approaching me. I turned around, but there was no one there. Just an empty space. That feeling never disappeared. As soon as I turned on the light, the weak light was not enough to dispel the darkness. The fluorescent light on the ceiling flickered endlessly, as if it were being controlled by a force beyond my control. In brief moments, I saw it, that shadow, standing right across from me, in the corner of the dark room, faceless, shapeless. But I felt its presence, clearly, as if it was looking at me, waiting for something. My heart was pounding, I couldn't move. That feeling, the feeling that I was trapped in the very space I thought I owned, pushed me to the point where I could barely breathe. The light went out, and I stood still, not daring to move. Was I trapped in a dream? But no, I could feel the coldness, the tension in the air. It's not a dream, it's reality. That presence does not stop at darkness. Somehow, I couldn't leave. I decided to face it. Every time I tried to find a way out, it appeared more clearly, following me, pulling me back. And that night, I decided to go upstairs, where the footsteps still echoed every night. The feeling of fear has become a part of me, but I can't stop. I need to face this fear once and for all. As I walked up the stairs, the hallway lights started flashing again. I tried not to pay attention to it, but that weak light made me feel like I was lost in a space that didn't belong to me. The footsteps above were getting closer and closer, the rhythm was fast as if someone was following my every step. I turned around, only to see darkness. There's nothing but darkness. It feels like there's no way out, like this house itself is trapping me. Every step I take seems to carry the weight of a life I can't escape. As I approached the door, I heard the door open slightly, as if someone was standing in there, waiting for me. I can't go back, because I know that if I do, I will never get out of this obsession. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. And then I see. The wall in the room is not an ordinary wall. It had large cracks, strange traces as if another door had been opened before, a door leading into another world. I couldn't believe my eyes. A dark space, full of strange noises echoing from inside. A blast of cold air blew past, and in that moment, I felt it, its presence. It is near. That wall is not a real wall. It is a cover, a barrier separating me from the truth. And when I walked through it, I knew I had gone too far to turn back. And then, I couldn't stop. I entered that dark space, a space that I could not understand. Everything seemed to disappear around me. The whispers kept echoing in my head, and I felt like I was being sucked into a vortex with no way out. This space is not a place for humans. It is where horrors are born, where shadows never leave. I know, when I walk through this door, I am no longer myself. And that house wasn't just a house, it was a trap, a place I would never escape. Because I've gone too far. Each night became longer, and my fear slowly crept into every thought. When I opened the door leading into the main hallway of the top floor, the sounds around me seemed to be amplified, the sound of electricity flashing through my shoes dragging on the floor, the sound of blood pounding in my ears. Everything became so sharp, so clear, that I felt like I could hear the air moving around. As soon as I stepped out of the room, a heavy feeling immediately enveloped me. This atmosphere is not only difficult to breathe but also carries something indescribable in words, as if the air here has become a living thing, surrounding me, suppressing me. That feeling made me want to run away immediately, but I couldn't. I told myself that I just needed to finish my work quickly, and everything would be fine. I walked, trying not to pay attention to the overwhelming thoughts. But when I went into a dusty room to collect some old tree roots, something stopped me. In the reflection of the glass wall that separated this room from the next, I saw that shadow, the tall shadow, standing motionless at the beginning of the hallway, staring at me. My whole body stiffened. My breath was stuck in my throat, I couldn't breathe. It felt like I had stood there for centuries, unable to take my eyes off that figure, even though everything in me wanted to turn and run. But I can't. Instinct can only stand still and observe. There are no warnings. Suddenly, the shadow took a step back, and the reflection in the mirror disappeared. I turned around, looking into the hallway, just empty space with old furniture, stacked dangerously on top of each other. But the feeling that had overwhelmed me was still there, impossible to get rid of. I stood there, my nerves tense, my hands cold. A feeling between fear and curiosity wrapped around me. What I just saw couldn't have been an illusion, right? Light can make everything become distorted, but there's no way that shadow could disappear like that. I asked myself if I was hallucinating from the stress, but I couldn't lie to myself. I saw something. The feeling of being watched stuck with me and I couldn't shake it off. I don't want to think about it, but it keeps repeating, invading every corner of my mind. I started avoiding eye contact with coworkers, especially when going upstairs. Every time I passed by it, my chest tightened, and I felt an invisible pressure on me. It felt like something was waiting for me there, like a predator lurking. And then at night, when I had to stay in the building, I felt like every noise was magnified. Every step on the stairs, every rustle of the curtains, they became all too clear. But the strange thing is, sometimes, I hear faint whispers. The words were inaudible, but I could feel their presence. Those soft whispers weren't human, they weren't sounds I could identify. I feel like they don't belong here. Those sounds had another origin, something other than human. I can't continue living in this feeling. Every night, I feel like I'm haunted by inexplicable shadows. Those figures, those strange whispers, they never stopped. I decided to face them, to push myself to the very end, otherwise I would never be able to escape. And one night, I went back upstairs, where I had felt watched. The hallway light flickered as usual, and I couldn't help but feel an invisible force pulling me towards it. Every step on the stairs brings with it the feeling of being closer to an inevitable death. But I can't stop. I had to face what was haunting me. As I approached the old room upstairs, a sudden coldness hit me. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. That cold feeling made it almost impossible for me to move. Suddenly, a squirming noise came from inside the room, a metallic groan, a prolonged sound like someone trying to escape a cage. Stepping inside, I noticed that the room was not only dusty but also contained a strange object, something I couldn't understand. In the corner of the room, there is an old table, on top of which is a small wooden box, locked tightly. I stepped closer, feeling like a gravitational force was pulling me there. My hands shook as I opened the box, and inside was an old piece of paper, written with words I couldn't understand. They don't seem to be in a human-readable language. And then, I saw something, a mark engraved on the opposite wall, a strange drawing, like an ancient symbol. A strange feeling surrounded me. A gentle whisper echoed in my head, like a warning. Don't go any further. I turned back to look at the darkness around me, and I understood that I couldn't go back anymore. The tracks, the whispers, the silhouettes, all of them led me here. This building contains more than just ordinary hauntings. It is a cursed place, a place where secrets have been buried, and now they are coming to the surface. It's not just a ghost story, it's a warning. And I accidentally entered a world I couldn't escape. The tension kept growing, and with each passing night, I couldn't shake off that invisible presence. The darkness in the building seemed to swallow me whole. The heavy footsteps seemed to come from every corner of the house, not simply a sound, but a heartbeat, a breathing rhythm of the house itself. Sighs were in the air, as if someone was inhaling and exhaling, following my every beat. Every night, I felt myself losing more and more control. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling kept flickering strangely, casting long shadows in the hallway, as if they were dragging something I couldn't see. I can feel its existence in every step I take, every movement of the space around me. Today, I cannot shake off the feeling that this house is more than simply an old building. It was like an invisible net tightening around me, every wooden plank on the floor, every chipped wall, like giant nets wrapping around me, making it impossible for me to escape. I started to think, I might never get out. This feeling, that presence, maybe it has taken root in my mind. Tonight, I had to stay at work again, unable to get out. I walked into the hallway, where I always felt like there were a pair of invisible eyes watching me. I walked, but each step seemed to be pulling me towards something I couldn't control. At this moment, the footsteps were not only coming from behind, but from all directions. They circled around me, repeating like a strange dance, constantly entwining me. I stopped, not daring to continue walking. I turned around and looked behind me. Everything is silent. That shadow, it wasn't an ordinary shadow. This time, I can clearly feel it. It wasn't an illusion. A tall figure stood quietly at the end of the hallway. The dim light from the fluorescent lights created a weak ring of light around the shadow, but not enough for me to see the face or shape clearly. It felt like it was staring at me. I can't move. My eyes couldn't leave that shadow, even though I knew I was being watched. Suddenly, the black shadow began to move. It approached me, each step slowly and steadily. Every step he took made my heart beat harder. Its steps are not human-like. It seemed like something non-human. As the shadow approached, I heard a whisper in the air. It was gentle, but inevitable, as if someone was standing right next to my ear, speaking inaudible words. I couldn't understand what it was saying, but I felt its warmth and breath, almost close to my ear. Run, before it's too late. My heart felt like it was about to explode in my chest, and I started to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. Every step I took seemed to plunge me deeper into darkness. I heard the footsteps of that shadow, as if it was following my every step, passing me by, no need to rush. But I can't stop. I just ran in extreme fear. I turned around to look, but that shadow kept following me, coming closer every second. As I approached the stairs, a sudden cold feeling enveloped me. Not the coldness of the air, but a gloomy coldness, as if I were entering another space, a space that did not belong to this world. That shadow was approaching me, no longer just standing still, it was pulling me towards the darkness. It felt like I had crossed the limit, and as soon as I stepped up the stairs, a wave of pain came, tearing the space around me. I don't know if I'm still conscious or not, but my eyes are still wide open, looking at distorted images, unrecognizable shadows. This space has changed, it is no longer the building I am familiar with. It becomes another world, a world full of nightmares that cannot be escaped. That shadow finally touched me, that cold hand grabbed my shoulder. I couldn't feel that hand, I just knew that its presence was too real. An incomprehensible force pressed down on me, making me unable to breathe, unable to move. We are no longer in the building. The surrounding space has completely changed. The shadows were overwhelming, and I couldn't see any way out. At this moment, I understood that I had become a part of that shadow. There's no way to get out. I am not human anymore, I am part of this darkness, and I will forever stay here. Adrenaline surged strongly, my heart pounded against my chest as if it were about to burst, each beat was so strong that I felt my limbs become wet, as if sweat was seeping into every muscle. I tried to stay calm, but my supervisors began to notice my state. They asked me if I was okay. I tried to explain vaguely, unable to clearly express my fear. I'm just saying that this place makes me feel claustrophobic, as if the air here is slowly suffocating me. They suggested I adjust my working hours, perhaps coming in earlier in the evening so I could leave before midnight. But some tasks still needed to be completed early in the morning, and I knew I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave work unfinished, even though the atmosphere around me became more and more oppressive, making me feel even more trapped in a nightmare. On a particularly volatile night, I stayed put, deciding to update the firmware for the servers around 2 a.m. I still remember that heavy feeling when I entered the server room on the second floor. Everything was strangely silent, and every step I took made me feel even more strange. As I stood near the servers, I heard the upstairs door slam 3 times in a row. The sound of the door closing echoed throughout the building, so strong that I felt a pressure in my chest, my throat tightened, and I almost dropped the flashlight in my hand. I can't explain it, but the temptation to run away, to run out, overwhelmed me. I stood still, but I knew I couldn't leave. These servers are performing a critical update, and if I leave it, it could crash the entire system. Even though fear was overwhelming, I still forced myself to stay, determined to finish the job. The next minutes dragged on endlessly. An eerie silence hung over everything, and I began to convince myself that maybe the wind had blown through some open window. But suddenly, I heard a sound of quick footsteps running across the floor, as if someone was running towards me. They stopped near the edge of the hallway just above me before rushing back in the opposite direction. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I couldn't understand how a living person could move so quickly in an empty floor, at this hour, without making any sound. I know clearly that this cannot be a human being. But that feeling, that sound of footsteps, was so real that I couldn't ignore it. I stood still, every nerve in my body taut. I couldn't do anything but stand there, listening. Finally, the firmware update is complete. I quickly gathered my things and headed down the stairs towards the exit. The hallway light flickered again, and my entire body trembled with fear. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, cannot be shaken off. Dark shadows, strange sounds, they were all surrounding me. I heard a light scratching sound, like nails dragging on metal, echoing from upstairs. That sound made me fight the initial urge to run outside, to rush out of this building immediately. But I can't. Part of me understood that if I left, it would be impossible to explain what had happened. Like a storm, it felt like the building itself was demanding my fear as payment for my intrusion into this space. Every step I took seemed to make it clearer and clearer. My vision blurred, and fear filled me. I could barely breathe. Every step becomes heavy, as if something is pulling me down, not allowing me to escape this building. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I knew I didn't have much longer to escape. Finally, I reached the front door, my hand shaking as I placed it on the doorknob. But when I opened the door, a sudden blast of cold air rushed in, forcing me to step back. The dark night out there is not the same as usual anymore. The nights I once knew are now cold and gloomy. It felt like something was waiting for me, standing outside the door, just waiting for me to open it and enter. I didn't dare look back. This feeling, it's not a normal fear. It was as if some force was controlling me, making it impossible for me to escape, forcing me into an evil that I couldn't understand. With every step, I felt like I had gone too far to turn back. The door was open, but I couldn't get out. This building, like a living organism, refused to let me leave. It holds me back, waiting for something to happen next. At this point, I understood that I was not looking for a way out anymore. But this house is trying to keep me. Dark shadows still follow me. The whispers, the eerie sounds, they all had a hold on me. And I understand that this story is not the end. But it was just the beginning of a nightmare that I couldn't escape. The feeling of being watched never stopped, and when I put my hand on the doorknob, I realized that I couldn't open it. It seemed like an invisible force was holding the door closed, forcing me to not be able to escape. My chest tightened, the air felt thick in my lungs, and I had to consciously breathe. Every time I inhaled, I felt coldness invade my body, but not from the surrounding air, but from within. Outside, the night had become terrifyingly quiet. The whole space seemed to stop breathing. But in that moment, I heard a soft sound from behind, a very faint whisper, as if someone was standing right behind me, trying not to be detected. "Don't go out, stay here." This feeling, this fear, is something I can't lie to myself anymore. Even though I was still standing in front of the door, unable to escape, I understood one thing: I was not facing a haunted house. I was facing something much larger, a presence that existed in and out of this space, and it didn't want me to leave. With an irresistible force, I took a step back. The feeling of being oppressed in this space becomes more and more severe. When I turned back to look towards the hallway, I saw dark shadows hovering around. But they weren't the usual dark shadows I'd seen. They were moving slowly and writhing as if they weren't shadows, but rather unrecognizable shapes, as if they were changing shape every moment. Suddenly, a sound rang out distinctly from behind me, like the gentle sound of footsteps. But when I turned around, there was no one. This building. It's not just watching me. It's trying to absorb me. Every sound, every silhouette, seemed to be built to make me feel like I no longer belonged to this world. An invisible existence is biting at my mind. One hazy night, when I had to work late again, I began to clearly feel that presence becoming stronger than ever. The air was not only stuffy, but also had a strange coldness, as if everything around me was gradually dissipating. Every step down the hallway seemed to take me deeper into another dimension, a dimension from which I could not return. I couldn't utter a word. That's what I feel. The feeling of no way out, no sound, no life other than the black shadows that are slowly enveloping me. My instinct was to run, to escape, but my body was stiff and unable to move. The dark shadows are still approaching, swirling around me. As I approached a large server room, I saw that the door was open, even though I was sure I had locked it before. A small noise sounded from inside the room, like a keyboard being typed, but no one was there. I could only stand and look into the thick darkness of that room, where I couldn't determine what was going on inside. It feels like something in the room is moving, not an object, but the presence of the house itself. Suddenly, a strong light flashed from inside the room, illuminating the entire space in front of me. I saw the image of a figure in that light, but as soon as I turned to look closer, the figure had disappeared. Suddenly, the space around me seemed to be compressed, the air became thick and difficult to breathe. I feel as if this house is swallowing me whole, suffocating my every breath, every feeling. Strange sounds rang out from behind again, like an invitation, a strong urge for me to continue entering the place where I knew there was no escape. I can't bear it anymore. Part of me wanted to leave everything behind, run away from those shadows, but another part made me feel like I was being sucked into them. I entered the room, where a strange light had illuminated, and for a moment, everything around me began to fade, as if I was caught in a nightmare with no way out. Only darkness remained and the soft whisper echoed in my head. You can't escape. This is where you belong. This is not a house. This is a trap. A trap that not only holds the body but also the soul of those who dare to enter. I was lost in a world of eternal darkness, where no one could escape. The feeling of suffocation did not lessen as I walked deeper into the dark corridors of this building. Tonight, everything seems to be more different than ever. Every step I took on the old floor, every small noise echoed in my mind as a reminder of the strange presence surrounding me. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was looking at me, watching my every move in silence. I decided to enter the server room again, where things got so strange tonight. Entering the room, I noticed that all the computers were on, their screens bright, even though there was no one controlling them. Every single line of code on the screen is not what I installed. It felt like a strange code, like someone was controlling the system remotely that I couldn't identify. When I looked back, I discovered that the walls around the server room were starting to change. The cracks in the wall stretched, as if the house was moving. A wall of unknown origin gradually appeared, as if it had always been there but I had never noticed it. As I approached, there was a sound from inside that wall, a soft hiss, like a door opening from another world. I couldn't resist my curiosity, stepped closer, and suddenly, the wall began to recede. A vast, dark, and cold space opened before my eyes. Strange paintings, ancient objects were hastily thrown on the floor, inexplicable symbols appeared on the walls. This is not part of the house that I know. This is another world, hidden behind the shell of this space. Suddenly, the door leading into that room slammed shut, echoing in the quiet space. I turned around to look, but saw nothing but darkness. There was only a whisper, very soft, as if someone was speaking right in my ear. It's forbidden to open the door. You can't come out. A cold feeling welled up inside me. I began to feel the stuffiness of the air becoming thicker, as if someone was squeezing my throat little by little. My vision gradually blurred, and when I looked back at the door, it was gone. There was no trace of the door anymore, just the wall, empty and silent. When I turned around, I saw a dark figure standing in the corner of the room, unable to be clearly identified. It stood there, still, with only its bright red eyes looking straight at me, as if it was watching, waiting for something. The dim lights from the computer screen reflected on its face, but I couldn't make out its shape. A strange feeling filled me, as if I was being sucked into a world that was not mine. Fear suddenly flared up inside me, and I turned around to run out. But everything has changed. The only door leading out was no longer there. I'm stuck. The shadows around me began to move, they writhed, transformed, as if they were not shadows, but living entities, moving in a strange way that I could not understand. As soon as I stood still, that shadow walked towards me. I can't run anymore. My legs don't listen to my commands. I stood facing it, my heart beating so fast I could hear my breathing echoing in my head. A sharp pain came from my chest, as if someone was squeezing my heart. A voice rang in my head, soft but clear, as if it came from a place that didn't belong to me. This house is ours. You have entered our world. You cannot escape. I realized that this house was not a haunted place, but something bigger, more horrifying. Creatures, shadows, and inexplicable presences are controlling me, making me a part of this world. I am part of it, a prey in an inescapable trap. The shadows around me became more and more clear, no longer as vague as before. Their every move is a clear presence. There were no more sounds, only heavy silence, surrounding me. I felt that shadow getting closer every second, but I couldn't move, I couldn't escape it. Finally, when it was right in front of me, I could only look into those glowing red eyes. And just before I completely lost consciousness, one last sentence rang out in my head: "Welcome to our world." Everything seems to be against me. Every step on the stairs, every breath becomes more difficult. The door finally opened, and I stepped out, breathing in the fresh air like a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. Even so, I still feel unable to escape the grip of this place. My body trembled, and a wave of fatigue swept over me, making me feel like I had just escaped an unknown war. Many times, I seriously considered quitting this job. I told the agency that this project was beyond my ability and asked for a break, but they refused. "The customer is satisfied with your work," they said, "and we will offer you a raise if you stay a little longer." My mind told me to refuse, but my heart was weak. They needed a plan to handle hardware and final inventory, and here I found myself again, with the wrong decision having been made. I agreed, but one thing I confirmed to myself was that I would never venture upstairs alone at night again. However, soon after, I was forced to break my promise again. A series of system errors occurred, requiring a manual reboot. These errors always appear at the worst possible time, around 11:45 p.m. And then I found myself standing in front of that damn staircase again, telling myself that this time I would make it quick and leave this house immediately. My mind couldn't stop fighting the feeling of tension rising inside me. Every one of my senses was stimulated to the extreme. The air around me seemed to become heavier, as if this house was still climbing the stairs with me, watching and waiting. I kept seeing movement in my peripheral vision, shadows flickering just out of sight, as if someone was watching me from behind. My skin was covered in goosebumps, and my heart was pounding in my chest, making me feel like I was about to be swallowed whole by that gloomy silence. When I entered the hallway on the top floor, I noticed everything was unusual. The lights here weren't as bright as usual, some had gone out completely, leaving behind a long, thick darkness. I turned on the flashlight, but it only illuminated a narrow path, and the rest of the hallway was in oppressive darkness. I can't stand the feeling of being surrounded by darkness. The closer I got to the final meeting room, the more I felt an invisible threat approaching. As I approached the door of the meeting room, a strange feeling surrounded me. Suddenly, the conference room door opened automatically with a terrifying creak, even though I hadn't touched it. A cold breeze rushed out from inside the room, so cold that I felt like something was choking my breath. The constant feeling of being watched weighed heavily on me, making it impossible to move. Every step forward became difficult, as if I were walking through a layer of thick air. When I opened the door completely, the light from my flashlight shone into the space inside. But then, what I saw made me unable to breathe. It's not just old, dusty objects in the room. It's my reflection, not on a mirror or glass, but on the floor. On the cold tile floor, there was a strange reflection. It was me, but it wasn't really me. It had my shape, but the face was distorted, without eyes. Instead, there were just deep, dark holes, staring straight at me. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. My footsteps no longer seemed to obey my orders. I continued to stand there, looking at that reflection, and from the darkness behind me, a cold wind gently blew past, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. There was a small noise, and I heard something in the throat, as if someone was trying to breathe, heavy, difficult, as if inhuman. I began to feel that presence, strange and strange, pulling me into a nightmare with no way out. My body was almost exhausted, but I forced myself forward, opening the door wider, my hands shaking as I touched it. The air inside the room was colder than the rest of the building, and it brought with it an indescribable feeling of stuffiness. I shined the flashlight around, and suddenly, disturbing noises began to echo in the room. It wasn't the sound of an old house. Those were footsteps, but they weren't mine. At this moment, I realized that I was no longer alone in this room. And that feeling, the feeling of being watched, the feeling that I was surrounded in this very space, made it impossible for me to leave the room. The door behind me slammed shut, and I knew that, as soon as it closed, I had no way out. The door is tight, there is no way out. And when I turned around, I saw it, a tall figure, standing motionless in the darkness of the room. This time, I can't lie to myself anymore. That was no ordinary shadow. It has a human appearance, but it is not human. The cold and incomprehensible look from its eyes made me feel like I was being sucked into another world where there was no way out. The feeling of suffocation never stops, weighing more and more on me. The flashlight in my hand trembled, illuminating the haunting darkness surrounding me. This house is not a place I can even call a residence. It has become a physical nightmare, where darkness is not just a part of space but a living organism, moving, waiting, watching. Every step I took was one step closer into that shadow, into the terrifying presence that enveloped me. At this point, I no longer felt like I was walking in a house. I felt like I was floating in a dark pool, where there was no end, no salvation. Every shadow in sight could be another form of that presence, could be invisible eyes staring at me. My head was spinning, strange noises continued to echo from the darkness. I heard footsteps moving behind me, as if someone was following me, but when I turned around, there was nothing but darkness. Soft sighs, maybe someone breathing into my ear, sounded like the sound of a soul about to escape the body. The darkness was like a thick liquid flowing into every crevice of my mind. It constantly invaded every cell in my body, each cold wind seemed to tear apart space, forcing me into a trap from which I could not escape. That shadow, the figure I saw in the meeting room, it was no ordinary figure. It had no discernible face, just a dark, shifting shape, as if not of this world. A long time later, when I had passed through the long dark hallway, suddenly, I stopped. I cannot continue. The images in my head were spinning. I feel like every step I take no longer belongs to me. It was as if an invisible force pulled me back, forcing me to face that shadow again. The darkness around me was heavy, the space seemed distorted, and then I heard a noise, a whisper. "Come here, this is where you belong." That voice didn't come from anyone I could see. It rang in my head, vaguely, but clearly. And that feeling, the feeling like I knew I would never get out of this house, was welling up inside me. I tried to turn around, tried to find a way out, but there was nothing but darkness, an invisible space that seemed to swallow me whole. As I continued walking, the flashlight illuminated another part of the house, and just as the light passed, I noticed something strange. The reflected images are not ordinary images. Not only did I see myself in the light of the flashlight, but distorted images appeared right next to me. Indistinct figures, distorted faces, as if they weren't mine. They laughed, but not with their mouths, but with a strange feeling, like my own fear was reflected back. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't stop. My steps felt like I was walking into a never-ending nightmare. I looked at the opposite wall and saw strange cracks on it. The cracks are not due to the age of the house, but are more like the tears of a living object. Suddenly, from within those cracks, I saw something looking out, deep, incomprehensible eyes, as if watching me. The feeling of fear overwhelmed me again, and I knew I couldn't go back. I was too deep into this house, into this space. Each step made me feel more and more drawn into another world, a world that I couldn't identify, couldn't understand. The last door I had approached suddenly opened automatically. There was no one standing there, but I felt a strong force pulling me in. I walked in, and a cold feeling hit my face immediately. As I entered, the space around me began to change. The walls are no longer fixed. They begin to shrink, as if they are trying to close the space. I could no longer clearly see any shapes other than black shadows swaying and spinning in the air. Strange sounds, rustlings, gasps, sounds like wobbly footsteps, made the air even heavier. At this point, I no longer dared to look back. My feet felt stuck to the ground, unable to move. A sound rang out from deep in the darkness. "You will never escape. This is where you belong." I couldn't make out who was speaking, but I knew it wasn't human. That feeling doesn't just come from the house, it comes from another force, a presence that controls this space. The shadowy figures around me are not a product of my imagination. They were moving, getting closer, and I knew I had fallen into a trap I couldn't get out of. The glass at the back of the room reflected a tall figure, standing tall like a giant ghost. My head was dizzy when I saw it, a creature with an unimaginable appearance. My chest tightened in panic, and a cold feeling enveloped my body. I couldn't take my eyes off it, that figure, standing motionless, as if watching me. Something inside me shattered at that moment, as if a part of my soul had fallen out of my body. All I could do was look at it, but I couldn't scream. My voice felt locked in my throat, unable to escape, as if that shadow had taken away my ability to speak. My whole body convulsed in fear. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to that shape, but then, like a shock, I tripped over a pile of cables lying haphazardly on the floor. My flashlight fell to the ground and made a loud clanking sound, almost driving me crazy. But I can't stop. I had to quickly pick it up and wave the beam of light wildly around the room. For that brief moment, I felt like time stood still, and as the light shone into the space behind me, the figure disappeared. Is this making me feel better? Or is it even scarier when I don't know where it goes? A feeling of despair overwhelmed me, like a wave sweeping me into a deep pool. My fear crumbled at that moment, giving way to a desperate determination. I couldn't continue to stand still, I couldn't continue to stand there, stalked by that shadow. I ran, despite all the pain in my body. The door slammed shut behind me as I rushed out of the room, but it seemed like an invisible presence was following me, watching my every step. It feels like the building itself is pounding in my heart, malice, never letting go. Every step I took, every sound echoed from under my feet, as if something was imitating me, running after me. My heart was beating so hard that I couldn't control my breathing. My knees began to wobble as I approached the stairs, and for a moment, I almost fell down. I forced myself to go down one painful step at a time. But no, I'm not getting out. I'm not leaving this place. It feels like I'm stepping into another place, another space. This building is not a place I can escape from. When I finally burst into the ground floor hallway, a creepy feeling came over me. My mind was spinning with a million unanswered questions. Was everything I just experienced real? Or was it because I was going crazy from stress and lack of sleep? Why is it following me? Why does it hide and only appear when I can't leave? These questions kept swirling in my head, but I couldn't find the answers. I nodded wearily, admitting to myself that there were things I would never understand. I left that building that night and swore I would never go back alone again. I negotiate daytime shifts and decline any nighttime duties. My supervisors weren't happy, but they couldn't help but accept it. They could see the terror etched on my face, and every time they asked about the presence upstairs, I said just one thing: I don't want any part of it. I don't dare think about it again, just remembering what happened makes my heart pound. Finally, the work is over. I completed my assignment, signed off the warehouse, and moved on to the next contract. But just when I thought I was free from that haunting, the echo of the building still lingered in my mind. Those walls, those dark hallways, that shadow, it's all still alive in my memory, in my mind. Even though I finished the job and moved on to another contract, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still stuck in that house. It wasn't just the walls, it wasn't just the darkness or the strange shadow I saw. It's a part of me, and everything I've been through will never fade away, even though I've left it. This obsession will never end. Memories of the house, of the darkness, of that shadow, will never leave me alone. And just when I thought I was free from its grip, I knew that one day, that shadow would return. And this time, I won't be able to run away. I couldn't escape that suffocating feeling. That shadow, that tall figure that I couldn't explain, constantly haunted me. Even though I have left that house, its image is still imprinted in my mind and cannot be erased. At night, I couldn't sleep without feeling like something was waiting for me, watching me in the dark. I tried to return to normal life, got a new job, and even though everything seemed fine on the outside, I couldn't erase the memory of that house. Every time I step into a dark space, I feel a cold breeze running down my spine, as if someone is standing right behind me. I can't shake the feeling that I can never truly escape that place. One night, when I was late for work, that feeling came back. This time not in the old house, but in a new office. I stood facing the dark hallway, where shadowy shadows seemed to be moving. Suddenly, a soft noise rang out, just a sigh, but it startled me. I turned around, but there was no one. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I was being watched, just like the nights I had spent in that house. I can't explain this feeling. Sure, I got out of there, but why do I feel like this? This feeling cannot be a coincidence. At that moment, I heard a very faint whisper, an unidentifiable whisper, but as clear as if someone were standing next to me. Never think you've left it. It will find you again. My heart stopped beating, and a cold feeling spread throughout my body. Those words echoed in my head, making it impossible for me to distinguish between what was real and what was an illusion. But I know one thing for sure, something has come back for me. After saying that, I started to feel myself being pushed towards the dark hallway. My steps seemed to move on their own, even though I didn't want them to. That feeling, the invisible urge, forced me to walk into the darkness that stretched before my eyes. With every step I took, I felt more and more trapped in a spiral I couldn't escape from. The dark shadows ahead kept moving, passing me, but when I looked back, there was no one there. Suddenly, I felt a distinct presence, as if someone was standing right behind me, watching me. I turned around, but there was only darkness. There was no one there, but that presence, the feeling of being watched, could not escape me. Entering the front room, I noticed something strange. All the electrical devices in the room turned on, and as soon as I walked in, all the computer screens lit up at once, like they were welcoming me. A soft hum rang out from the computer, as if it was responding to my presence. I moved closer, and on the screen, strange words appeared. They weren't any code I'd entered, but an incomprehensible string of characters. But there was one thing I noticed immediately: my name, written in full, was appearing on the screen, accompanied by words I couldn't explain. Before I could see clearly, a cold wind blew strongly through the room. The surrounding windows slammed shut, and the room was suddenly plunged into complete darkness. An unbearable feeling came over me. I turned around to run away, but suddenly a light flashed, and I saw it, that figure, standing right in the middle of the room, red eyes staring at me. I can't move. The feeling of despair once again overwhelmed me. Soft whispers echoed in my head, "This place is ours. You've come too deep. You can't leave." I felt my body become heavier, as if something was pulling me underground. My vision blurred, and distorted images began to appear. I don't know if I'm still alive or not, or if I've completely fallen into this world of darkness, where all feelings become empty, where I can't recognize myself. That shadow approached me, every step it took was like a punch to my mind. And as it stood before me, I heard one last sentence: "You can never escape. You belong to us. Only darkness remains." The images, sounds, and feelings of that haunted house gradually sink into a dark area, with no end in sight. I couldn't escape, couldn't remember what happened, and then I realized that I had become a part of it. There is no way out. And the whispers continued, a warning that I could never leave this world. That building never really left me, no matter how hard I tried to leave. To this day, I still catch myself sneaking glances at reflective surfaces, especially in unfamiliar hallways, places I'm not familiar with. Every time, a part of me longs to see that tall shadow, standing there, watching me in the night. At those times, I couldn't understand it, but a strange feeling arose within me, something that I couldn't deny was watching me. At night, when I heard noises in my own house, the noises were small but reminded me of the footsteps pounding above my head that night. When I heard those noises, I had to stand up straight on the bed, my breathing quickened, my heart pounding, not daring to move, as if something was lurking in the darkness around me. I always told myself that I was in my own home, but nonetheless, a nagging doubt persisted. Had I really escaped that presence, or was it still quietly following me? I cannot say for sure. All I know is, whenever I remember the oppressive atmosphere in that house, the dimly flashing lights, that shadow, it all filled my head like a chill running down my spine. No amount of peace of mind can erase those images. Even though I survived that place without any physical harm, the lingering uneasiness still did not leave me. Part of that house, the images, the sounds, are imprinted in my mind. There are nights when I wonder if that darkness is a reflection of the stress and anxiety in my own mind. But perhaps, actually, that building, with all its hidden secrets, hides something far more sinister than any haunted legend I've ever heard. I found no definitive explanation for what I experienced, only that the lingering fear never left me. Whenever I hear a door slam or see flickers of movement in a hallway, I can't help but remember that place, can't help but remember that shadow, the silent watchman, waiting quietly in the dark. I used to think that the quietest hours before dawn had a solemn beauty, as if there was something almost spiritual about existing in a space that was already too crowded and chaotic, now becoming deserted and quiet. But one evening, in that silence, I heard whispers coming from the men's locker room when no one was there. That strange feeling was like a sign, as if something was there that I couldn't understand. From that day on, the silence in the 24-hour gym became unnerving, and I couldn't walk through the heavy gyms, where the glass doors reflected my every move, without feeling my heart pounding. I signed up for a gym membership after a promotional event. At that time, I was attracted by the promise of modern equipment and the convenience of being able to come whenever I wanted. At first, I was excited about the idea of being able to work out in the middle of the night or early in the morning when no one was around. But then, every time I entered the room, I felt the tension increasing. The familiar feeling of the late hours became heavier and more mysterious, as if my old home was surrounding me again. Every step I took in the gym seemed to lead me into another space, a space I couldn't escape. The tension, the rustling sounds in the dark, and the feeling of never being able to breathe filled me again. Even though I left my old house, even though I changed jobs and lives, the fear never went away. It still seems to follow me, seeping into every cell. And I know one thing for sure, that place, that haunted house, will always be with me. No matter how hard I try to forget or keep moving forward, the feeling of being watched, of being monitored, will never leave me. That feeling is like an eternal ghost in my mind. Every night when I can't sleep, I can't be at peace. And sometimes, just a small noise makes me think about that house, think about that shadow, and I have to face the fear that is deeply rooted in my soul. Even though I left that house, the obsession still did not let me go. Every day I live, every night I sleep, I still can't escape those images. That building, with its walls that once surrounded me, is now an inseparable part of my mind. Its dark shadows, rushing footsteps, and gloomy silence are still present in my every moment. One night, as I sat in my new apartment, dim lights illuminating the space, I suddenly noticed something I had never noticed before, my shadow on the wall. But that's not my normal shadow. It was taller, longer, and when I looked closely, I saw it moving without me moving. I stood up, walked out of the room, and the darkness in that room seemed to follow me, like a hidden monster. I cannot explain this feeling. As I walked through the hallway, my eyes kept following the darkness, but not out of fear but out of a strange urge. It felt like someone was standing at the end of the hallway, waiting for me. But when I turned around, there was nothing but darkness and silence. This strange feeling constantly clings to me. My mind was chaotic, unable to distinguish what was real and what was an illusion. I can't help but remember that house. I thought I had left that place, but did I really leave that space? As I looked at the opposite wall, darkness began to settle around me again, slowly flowing out like a dark liquid. And then, I heard footsteps, clearly, from the end of the hallway. Those steps are not mine. The feeling of being watched grew stronger and stronger. I can't understand. With every step I took, that feeling grew deeper. Looking in the mirror, I saw my reflection, but it wasn't me anymore. My eyes were no longer mine, they became opaque, dark, as if something had taken over them. I couldn't take my eyes off the mirror, even though I knew I couldn't believe what I saw. The voice in my head rang again, a soft whisper, but very clear, "Never leave, never get out." And that was when I realized, that shadow, the shadow I had seen in the old house, was not simply a nightmare. It is here, with me, every moment. It's a part of me. An inseparable part. Day after day, I continue to live in this tension. Every time I look into the darkness, I can't help but feel that the shadow is following me, clinging to my every step. When I walk through quiet spaces, it feels like an invisible arm touches me, pulling me closer, but when I turn around, there's no one. One night, I was walking down the street, and when the streetlights hit the ground, I realized that it wasn't my shadow that was falling. It was another shadow, like the one I had seen in the old house, long and tall, following me every step. I turned around, but there was no one there but me. That shadow is still there, unchanged, unchanged. That shadow is not just a shape in space, but an inseparable part of me. I can't run away anymore. This space, these streets, are nothing but its shadow. Every time I look at the reflective walls, I always find it. And not only that, I felt it looking at me through every mirror, through every window. I tried to reason everything out, convincing myself that it was just stress in my mind. But part of me knew I couldn't escape. That shadow is still waiting, still watching, still a part of me, and I can never leave it. That shadow never goes anywhere. Every night, I lie in bed, feeling like something is standing next to me, even though I can't see it. My heart was pounding, and in the silence of the night, I heard inexplicable noises. Footsteps, light breathing, whispers from somewhere I couldn't identify. And I know, that is the shadow, waiting for me, to take me into eternal darkness, where I can never escape. The feeling of being watched has become an inseparable part of me. Every day, every step I take carries that worry. It wasn't a passing fear, it was a haunting feeling, a darkness that existed inside my mind. When I looked in the mirror, I not only saw my image, but also felt something standing right behind me, staring at me, even though no one was there. A chill ran down my spine, making me unable to stop. I had to turn away, but I still felt that something was standing behind me, never leaving. One night, when I went out for a walk, I suddenly saw my shadow on the sidewalk under a streetlight. But it's not my shadow anymore. That shadow was taller, longer, and when I stood still and looked at it, I saw that shadow move, as if there was an invisible hand controlling it, reaching out from my own body. I turned around, my heart pounding, but there was nothing but the darkness of the empty street. And I understand that, whether I turn back or not, that shadow is still there, still watching me. Space becomes heavier. Every time I enter a room, whether inside the house or on the street, I always feel someone is standing in a hidden corner, watching me. Not an ordinary shadow, but a shadow with depth, an invisible presence that filled the space. My footsteps seemed to echo in the quiet space, but they were not my voice. It was a sound of footsteps that I couldn't understand, as if someone, or something, was following me. Every time I enter a new room, the atmosphere feels different. The room seemed cramped, as if the space was suffocating me. Every object in the room, the painting on the wall, the old wooden chair, or the dim light from the lamp, seemed so real, so concrete, that I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The walls are not ordinary walls anymore. They became secret doors, passages that led me into another world that I couldn't understand. One night, while I was lying in my room, I heard a small noise again. It was a sigh, very gentle, but clear. I stood up, my heart pounding. My eyes looked into the darkness around me, and I knew that I couldn't escape this feeling. My breathing became rapid and choked in my throat. That breathing sound wasn't mine, but I couldn't determine its origin. I looked around the room, there was no one there but me. But why do I feel like someone is standing right next to me? A cold breeze blew past, and I suddenly realized that I was scared not because I heard a noise, but because I was feeling that presence, feeling the shadow waiting for me in space. I turned around and pulled the blanket up, but that feeling didn't go away. Just when I thought I had calmed down, a soft noise rang out again, as if someone was touching the door. Every night, that shadow follows me to sleep. When I close my eyes, I still feel its presence. Every time I wake up in the middle of the night, that shadow is there, in the corner of the room, in the walls, in the air. That feeling never goes away, it has no clear shape, but I know it is there. I can't escape that shadow. It has been a part of me, a part of this space, a part of everything I have been through. No matter where I go or what I do, it still follows me. Part of me wanted to think it was just a reflection of fear, something I created in my head, but I couldn't ignore the feeling. Movements out of sight, small footsteps I heard from behind, invisible whispers, they were not coincidences. One night, I woke up in the middle of my sleep, my heart pounding. Light from the window shone into the room, but the atmosphere was still thick. I can't feel the space around me anymore. A feeling of fear, an indescribable obsession, enveloped me. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in my vision. I couldn't see clearly, but I felt the presence. It doesn't stand still. It moved towards me, closer by the second. I closed my eyes, but couldn't escape the feeling that it was approaching. I can't stop. It found me. That shadow, it's not just a part of the house, but a part of me, of myself, living in my mind. And I can't escape it. As I continued to practice at late hours, I didn't think I would encounter such strange events again. The hours of practice in the middle of the night or early morning, when I can enjoy a quiet space, always make me feel as if I am the only one existing in this space. There were no noises from other people, no hustle and bustle from athletes, no intrusions from strange eyes. But that's why it becomes even more strange. That evening, I went to the gym at 1 a.m., and everything seemed normal. The automatic doors made a familiar mechanical hiss, and pale yellow light from above shone down on the reception area, where there were only a few empty waiting chairs. Even though the floors were cleaned, I still smelled a faint disinfectant smell around the reception desk. The gym was deserted, with only one or two other people on the treadmill or elliptical. I put on my headphones, tried to keep pace with my workout, and thought it would be great without anyone bothering me. However, as soon as I started climbing on the treadmill, a strange feeling appeared. That feeling was not the usual coldness that I often felt from the air conditioning system, but a subtle flow in the air, an invisible tension that I couldn't explain. My breathing became heavy. My arms were covered in goosebumps, and I couldn't stop the feeling. It was not simple coldness but a different kind of aura. It feels like this entire gym is being controlled by something invisible but very real. I looked over my shoulder, suspicious that someone was standing right behind me, but every time I looked back, it was just me in a reflection of floor to ceiling, mirrors and uniform fixtures. The overhead lights flickered once or twice, and even though I told myself it was just the wiring fault, I couldn't shake the feeling. Every time I looked at the blurred reflections, I felt the presence of something staring back at me from the darkness. I stopped, a feeling of boredom and restlessness rising in my heart. Not because the workout was physically intense, but because I felt that there was a presence watching me. After completing the workout, my body was not tired because of the intensity of the exercise, but because of the nervous tension. An inexplicable fatigue. Sweat flowed not only from my body but also from the fear that slowly invaded my mind. I wondered if I was imagining too much, but that feeling stuck with me and wouldn't let go. The uncontrollable shivers, the times I looked back because I thought someone was standing in the dark, made me unable to stop my suspicions. A few days later, I returned to the gym another late night, only to witness the next strange thing. At this point, I no longer felt like I was the only person in the room. Even though there was no one there but me, I felt a change in the air, as if someone was quietly observing me from afar. Small noises, like footsteps moving from the end of the hallway, sounded very gently but were enough to make me feel cold all over. With every step I took towards the exercise machines, the air became thick, as if space had been choked. Every light on the ceiling seemed to grow dimmer, as if something was obscuring them. A feeling of fear rose within me. I turned to look over my shoulder, and then I saw a figure, looming at the end of the hallway. A silhouette, tall and shadowy, stood silently, not moving, not making a sound. It felt so real, so close, that I couldn't breathe. As I started to get closer, the figure suddenly disappeared into thin air, as if vanishing into darkness. I stood there dumbfounded, unable to understand. Why am I seeing this? Is it because of the light, or am I just too tired? But that feeling, the tension in the air, was inexplicable. Blurred images and vague silhouettes kept wandering around me, making it impossible for me to know for sure whether I was living in reality or trapped in a never-ending nightmare. I turned away and hurriedly walked out of the gym, but the feeling of that presence still followed me, as if it was following every step I took. And no matter how hard I try to run away, I know that there is no place where I can find peace, no place that can save me from the darkness that is slowly taking over my life. When I finished my shoulder workout around 2:30 a.m. and moved to the stretching area, the space around me became eerily silent. The only sound was the dull hum of the vents pushing out cold air from the air conditioning system. I lowered myself onto the mat to stretch, my mind tired after a long workout. But then, a sudden noise interrupted the silence, the sound of feet shuffling across the rubber floor. It felt like someone was moving behind me, but when I stopped and listened, I realized that it was nothing. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't see anyone. I looked around, my eyes scanning the rows of empty machines, but there was no one in sight. The sound continued for a second or two, then suddenly stopped, as if something had disappeared at once. I told myself that it could be my own footsteps, or a malfunctioning ventilation duct. But reason cannot erase this strange feeling. Every time I turned around, the darkness of the gym made me feel like I wasn't alone. Part of me wanted to believe it was my imagination, but the feeling kept nagging at me. A few weeks later, I went back to the gym later one night. I felt more tired than usual, but as is my habit, I still showed up for at least a short workout session. When I arrived, it was past 3 a.m., and the overhead lights were dim, casting long, eerie shadows on the weight machines. The surrounding air became heavy, as if an invisible presence was covering the place. A strange scent lingered in the air. It reminded me of damp towels that had been washed for too long and left in a corner somewhere. The smell is musky, slightly sour, and not at all pleasant. I wondered if it was the smell of the gym being damp, but that strange feeling couldn't just be the scent. I start my routine with some light cardio, then do a few sets of bench presses. But just as I was in the middle of the last round, I felt incredibly thirsty. My throat was dry and raw, as if I hadn't drunk water all day. Deciding to rest for a while, I went to the fountain near the men's locker room. The hallway leading to the drinking area was flooded with flickering fluorescent lights. The harsh light made the shadows on the pale tiles long and eerie, as if the hallway was becoming endless, never-ending. My footsteps echoed in that space, as if the sound was echoing from afar. The space seemed to stretch further with each step. As I bent down to fill my bottle, I heard a faint whisper from behind. The voice is not too loud, but clear. It was Portuguese, a language I didn't understand, but the voice had a strange charm. It was clear, but fading, as if carried by a dying breath, an invitation, or maybe a command, I couldn't say for sure. That whisper was cold, and though I couldn't explain it, I felt frozen in place. Part of me wanted to believe it was another gym-goer calling me, but as soon as I turned around, there was no one. The hallway was still deserted, and the dim light from the floating bulbs seemed to be playing with my mind. This feeling cannot be extinguished. My mind tried to explain what had just happened, but the feeling of being watched, monitored from somewhere in the darkness, was inescapable. I told myself that maybe I was too tired, maybe it was hallucinations caused by lack of sleep. But I knew, deep down in my mind, this couldn't just be my imagination. The whisper still echoed in my head, unable to stop. I couldn't help but feel that something had changed in this space, in this gym. Even though I tried to run away, even though I did everything to calm down, that presence, the invisible shadow, the inexplicable sound, was still there, clinging to me, never letting go. The more I tried to escape it, the stronger I felt that presence. In the dim space of the deserted gym, noises, whispers, and inexplicable coldness kept surrounding me. I can't differentiate between reality and illusion. I can't escape this feeling, a feeling I can't name, but I know it's following me, closer and closer. Even when I tried to walk out of that hallway, the strange feeling didn't leave me. Even though I filled my water bottle and tried to concentrate on the workout, the atmosphere in the gym seemed heavier than ever. Every step I took made me feel more and more like there was something unrecognizable in the room, just waiting to trap me in that obsession. When I returned to the exercise machines, I started hearing unusual sounds. They weren't the sounds of machines working or the sounds of me moving. Instead, it was the sound of shuffling footsteps, as if someone was moving in the room, but I couldn't see them. Every time I turned around, there were only empty mechanical devices and darkness floating in space. My heart was pounding, I could clearly feel the tension in the air. Part of me wanted to run away from this place, but another part forced me to continue, as if an invisible force was pulling me back, not allowing me to escape. As I approached the treadmill, the cold feeling spread throughout my body again. A breeze passed by, but it was not an ordinary breeze. It was like there was someone standing near me, their breathing was gentle, but I could feel their presence. My eyes looked around, but there was still no one in sight. That feeling became more and more distinct, I couldn't suppress it. Suddenly, I felt a movement in the darkness. A shadow, very faint, very thin, was moving along the walls of the gym. I couldn't see it clearly, but it seemed to be approaching. It felt like a ghost was approaching me, but I couldn't see its face clearly, only a dark and inexplicable shape. This feels so real, it's like a never-ending nightmare. When I stepped on the treadmill and started moving, I felt that shadow following me from behind, but I didn't dare turn around to check. My steps seemed to echo in the quiet space, but I couldn't erase that feeling, that I was not alone in this room. Every time I looked in the mirror, the darkness seemed to get thicker. I saw my image, but I couldn't see my face clearly anymore. It blurred, as if a part of me had been erased in that space. The dim lights from the overhead lights cast long shadows on the walls, and when I looked at them, I noticed that they were moving, as if something was changing in the space itself. Those footsteps, those strange sounds, all were signs that I couldn't explain. I don't know if they were hallucinations caused by excessive stress or the real presence of something. But there's one thing I can't deny, I can't shake the feeling that that shadow is watching me, waiting for me, watching my every step. And then, in the most tense moment, I stopped in the middle of the gym, feeling a strange silence. The whole space seemed to stop, like everything in this room was waiting for me to do something. But I can't do anything. I can't run, I can't leave. That presence did not allow me to escape. I turned around and looked towards the door where I had entered, but now, I could no longer see the exit. It felt like the building itself had changed, as if it had become an endless maze that I couldn't escape. Every step I took made the space around me become more cramped, as if I were being trapped in a vortex with no way out. That shadow is still there, never leaving. It moves within the walls, in the shadows, but is never clearly present. I can feel it, but I can't see it. And every time I tried to run away, that shadow returned, filling the space, trapping me in fear. There was no one to save me, no way out. Every step I took led me into deeper darkness, a space I couldn't escape from. That feeling, the feeling of being watched and monitored, makes it impossible for me to live peacefully. That shadow still follows me, and I know that I will never escape. The space in the gym is becoming increasingly stuffy. Each step I took seemed to stretch the space further, each step echoed in the room as if creating a dark echo, echoing from the silent walls. The weak light of the fluorescent lamp was only enough to illuminate a small part of the space, the rest was in dense darkness. But the more I looked into that darkness, the more I felt like an invisible force was gradually covering me. I feel the breath of the space around me, as if this room itself is breathing in and out, like a living entity is quietly observing me. That shadow, still the same, hidden in the darkness, but this time it was no longer a faint shape. It gradually became clearer, a dark, haunting shape, standing in a hidden corner of the room, only a look was needed to detect its presence. The feeling of fear kept rising inside me. Not because of strange sounds or invisible footsteps, but because of the presence of that shadow, an inexplicable, inseparable presence. The shadow didn't just stand there, it seemed to be moving, gliding through each wall, gradually getting closer to me. I started to notice something strange. The light bulbs on the ceiling are no longer evenly lit. They flickered continuously, as if they too were being controlled by an invisible force. That loss of control makes the space blurry, the images reflected in the mirrors become distorted and no longer clear. I looked at those reflections and saw myself, but felt like I wasn't me anymore. That shadow is overwhelming my own image. Every step in this space seems to take me into a dark maze with no way out. Unexplainable noises and gentle breezes made the air even colder. I felt like everything around me was becoming blurry, as if I was slowly being engulfed in darkness, unable to find a way out. The feeling gets worse and worse. That shadow is getting closer. It was no longer a mere silhouette, but an entity, an invisible creature, hovering in the darkness, trying to reach me. The sounds from behind me kept coming, but when I turned around, there was nothing. It felt like there was a presence, something following me, but I couldn't see it clearly. I tried to quickly walk out, but the feeling became stronger and stronger. That figure didn't just stand still, it started moving in space, moving towards me. I felt every heartbeat pounding in my chest, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Every step I take seems unable to escape the grip of that shadow. I know I can't leave here, but I can't stop. While I was extremely stressed, I suddenly heard small whispers, very gentle but clear, as if those sounds were not only echoing in the air but also from deep within my mind. Those whispers were like warnings, reminding me of that shadow's inseparable presence. "You can't get out," said the voice in my head. It was not a human voice, but something, invisible, cold and powerful. I looked around, but there was no one. Everything is silent. But that shadow is still there, closer to me than ever. I can't differentiate between what is real and what is an illusion. The atmosphere was so thick that I couldn't breathe, and even when I tried to run away, that shadow followed me, never leaving. The truth is I no longer know where I am. I no longer recognize the space around me. Everything becomes blurred and unclear. Darkness seemed to cover my entire body, making me feel like I was sinking deep into a bottomless pit, where there was no way out. That feeling, the oppression of space, could no longer be endured. Every step I take is a blind step into that shadow. The darkness not only enveloped me physically but also ate away at my mind. I began to feel lost, not knowing what was real and what was an illusion. Part of me wanted to escape, wanted to leave this place, but another part forced me to go deeper. Those shadows are not something I can hide from. They have become a part of me. That darkness does not let me go. It took over my mind, and I no longer felt like I could escape. That shadow became a part of me, of this space, and I realized that I would never escape it. The whispers continued to echo in my head, telling me that I would never escape this darkness. That shadow will always be with me, waiting, watching. But there is no liberation. I can't leave. And I know, one day, I won't be able to tell who I am anymore. That shadow swallowed me, making me a part of it. I stood there, quietly in the dim hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The sounds of the changing room are not the normal noises I hear every day. Instead, there was something different, like a strange silence filled the space. I turned to look towards the men's locker room, where the dim light only illuminated a small portion of the space, leaving the rest in dense darkness. That door stood there, like a large jar, but there was something in the space that made me feel unable to enter. The voice I heard earlier still echoed in my head, but it sounded like someone was speaking from a distance that was both near and far, as if I couldn't reach it. I called out a gentle hello, but there was no response. The air became heavier than ever. The feeling of being watched, the feeling of invisible eyes staring at me from the dark corners of the dressing room made me unable to stand still anymore. Even though I was full of doubts, I still walked forward, deciding to go in and find out what was going on. Every step felt like a heavy touch to the air, as if space was trying to hold me back, not letting me leave. When I entered the dressing room, I was surrounded by an eerie silence. The row of lockers stretched out in front of me, without a single person in sight. The smell of antiseptic and damp sweat in the air makes this space more stuffy. My skin got goosebumps as I passed by the benches, with no one sitting, only long shadows from hidden corners. Each step made the space around me more terrifying. The stalls were empty, without any signs that anyone was there. But I can't erase the feeling that someone spoke to me just a moment ago. The words echoed in my head, like a soft whisper that I couldn't hear clearly. I stood silently, water bottle in hand, and tried to hear if there was any sound, but there was nothing but quiet silence, which made me even more confused. Although I couldn't explain why, the certainty that someone had told me lingered in my head. That feeling kept following me, making me feel more insecure than ever. I quickly turned away, trying to leave this place, but when I stopped, I felt like something was following me, looking at me from an invisible place in this room. I wanted to go out, but my legs were paralyzed and I couldn't walk faster. The next day, as I continued practicing, that feeling did not leave me. Every time I do a squat or lift weights, that sentence rings in my ears. Every time, it was as if someone whispered behind my back, making me turn around, but there was no one. I started to find it difficult to exercise. Every movement became urgent and hasty, as if I was looking for a way to finish quickly and leave this place. But no, the feeling of fear still followed me, as if a new layer of fear was covering me, not allowing me to escape. A week later, I decided to go back to the gym at the usual late hour. I tried to convince myself that I couldn't let fear control my life, but when I entered, I realized the place was emptier than ever. There was no sign of the night shift staff, although the lights at the reception still glowed faintly. I walked into the hallway and felt a stuffy atmosphere, like a storm was about to strike. As I walked past the machines and approached the changing rooms, the space seemed even heavier. That feeling, this strange feeling, this feeling that I couldn't explain, enveloped me. Clattering footsteps sounded from behind, like someone was following me, but when I turned around, there was nothing but darkness. But I know, something is watching me from that darkness, waiting for me, ready to step out of the darkness to engulf me again. This darkness is no longer just a passing feeling. It is gradually swallowing me, trapping me in a space full of fear and oppression. The whispers, the invisible footsteps, that shadow, all of it made it impossible for me to escape. I can't differentiate between what is real and what is an illusion. Every time I think I can escape it, it comes back, stronger, weighing me down. I can't run away from that shadow. That shadow is not just an invisible shape in this space, but a part of me, a part of fear that I cannot control. And I know, no matter how hard I try to run away, I will never escape it. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. Every night, when I step into the gym, the space around me becomes cramped and difficult to breathe. A feeling of tension began to rise inside me, like someone was watching my every move. The dim lights on the ceiling cannot ease the frustration in this space. Strange noises, invisible footsteps that I couldn't see but felt very clearly, all of these things were happening over and over again, constantly following me. Every time I turned to look, I saw darkness. And every time that darkness approaches, I feel its presence. Something invisible but very real, as if it was slowly swallowing me. The feeling of not being able to escape, the feeling of being trapped in a space that is gradually shrinking around me, making it impossible for me to escape. Whenever I walked into a dark hallway, I felt like invisible eyes were staring at me, from places I couldn't see. One night, I tried not to let fear take over me anymore. I convinced myself to continue, to be strong, to face this strangeness. I entered the gym when it was late, everything around was quiet, but I felt the air was uncomfortably thick. It felt like every object in the gym was watching me, every light seemed just a blur, not enough to ease this haunting silence. I tried to continue my exercise, but as I passed the rows of machines, I heard the noise again. It wasn't the sound of machinery, but the sound of footsteps, like someone was following me. I didn't dare turn back, just kept walking, but my heart was pounding like it wanted to jump out. Those footsteps grew closer and closer. And then, I stopped. Come back. Nobody. But the feeling of being watched is even more obvious. The space around me seemed to become a dark vortex from which I could not escape. I looked in the mirror, saw my reflection, but the look seemed blurred, as if I was no longer me. I felt like there was something lurking in there, waiting, looking at me but not being able to see it. When I entered the dressing room, the space became even more eerily quiet. Everything was so quiet that I could hear my breathing. I opened the door, and walked in feeling my body trembling. The space around me had become stuffy, every step I took seemed to echo in that space. The dim light from the single light bulb on the ceiling seemed insufficient to illuminate the entire room. Darkness overwhelms everything. As I passed the pews, I saw empty lockers. There was no one in the dressing room. But this silence makes me feel more and more worried. I stood in the middle of the room, trying to listen. Suddenly, there was a small noise, as if someone was moving in the dark, but when I turned around, there was nothing. It's just me, and the space is dead silent. Once again, I felt someone's eyes watching me from the darkness. Another night, I went back to the gym, just like before, hoping that things would return to normal. But I know, deep down, things will never be the same again. Every step I take, I feel that shadow behind me. Whether I go back or not, I know it's always there, silent but haunting. The space in the gym is still the same, deserted and silent. But I couldn't escape the feeling that there was an all-encompassing presence, watching my every step, every move. I felt like I couldn't go on anymore, even though I knew I had to. As I walked through the hallway again, there was a whisper from behind. This time, I don't dare go back again. I cannot continue to live in this fear, but I cannot escape it. With every step I took, every move I made, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. There is something, or maybe someone, still there, watching me, covering this space. I can't say exactly what it is. Is it a hallucination, or is there really something haunting me? But I know that, no matter how hard I try, I cannot escape that darkness. The darkness had taken hold of me, had seeped into my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling of an invisible presence that enveloped me. Every night, I went back to the gym, convincing myself that I could master my fear. But every night, I feel that shadow getting closer and closer. It's not just an invisible thing anymore, it has become a part of me, of this space. And I understand that there is no escape, no place I can run to. That shadow still follows me, always with me. The shadow of confusion, fear and obsession was overwhelming my mind, creating a closed space with no way out. In that space, every sound and every noise became extremely clear, pushing me into a dark psychological spiral that I could not escape from. As I continued the exercise, the sound of heavy weights echoed rhythmically, but suddenly, the music in the room turned off completely. The gym fell silent, except for my own breathing. Each breath was like an echo in the silent space. For just a moment, a strange static sound, like a whisper, hissed through the speakers, making the air thick, as if someone was whispering to me. There were no clear words, but the noise had a strange, almost human quality that made me feel creepy. I stood there, my hands shaking. I can't explain that feeling. Cold sweat drenched my palms and I could taste fear. It was bitter, like copper on my tongue. Reason tried to fight the rising paranoia, but I couldn't stop thinking that there was a presence in the darkness waiting for me. That feeling hasn't left me. Every time I turned around, I saw my own reflections in the mirrors lining the hallway. But my reflection is no longer me. The image stretched and twisted, as if the mirror itself was warping and twisting. The lights on the ceiling flickered continuously, creating short periods of darkness, making the space around me even more dim, as if I was lost in another world, a completely different world. Every time the power went out, for a split second, I swore I saw the silhouette of something. Not humanoid. It was an outline, flickering at the edge of my vision, like a strange, unidentifiable presence, always there but never clear. My eyes couldn't believe what they were seeing, but the feeling was so real, so strong. As I finished my workout and headed towards the locker room to grab my bag, my steps seemed heavier than ever. The hallway leading to the locker room was colder now, even though I was wearing sweaty gym clothes. I don't understand why I feel this way. Even though it was just a familiar hallway, I felt like something invisible was surrounding me, watching my every step. I put my ear close to the dressing room door without understanding why. In the quiet space, I heard a faint, gentle breathing sound, not the sound of human breathing, but like the breathing of some invisible entity. The sound of breathing made my stomach tighten, making my mind reel. A voice in my head screamed at me to turn around, to leave immediately, but an irresistible curiosity pulled me forward. As I crossed the threshold, a cold chill ran down my spine. The lights above me went out, and the room fell into pitch darkness. It felt like I was completely engulfed in silence. It felt like space had swallowed me whole, and I was enveloped in a space where I couldn't tell what was real and what was an illusion. I felt the presence of something in the darkness, something surrounding me. I couldn't see clearly, but I felt the presence clearly, as if it was standing near me, watching me, waiting for what I would do next. This feels like I'm trapped in a vortex with no way out. That invisible presence was pulling me down, into a dark space with no exit. I couldn't escape, couldn't run away, even if I wanted to. Every step I took me deeper into the darkness. Every time I looked back I saw a faint shape, always there, waiting, watching. The tension rose to the extreme. That shadow was not just an invisible shape, but a part of this room, a part of the darkness that surrounded me. And I understand that I cannot escape it. It has become a part of me, in this space. With each passing second, I felt like that darkness was swallowing me whole. That night, I don't know how long I stood in the dressing room. Time becomes meaningless. Everything around me seemed to have turned into a mass of uncertain space, where nothing was clear, nothing real. The silence was thick, making me feel like I was sinking into an abyss that I couldn't escape from. I couldn't escape those haunting images. The whispers kept ringing in my head, as if someone was repeating those words from a faraway place, always chasing me. But one thing is undeniable, I am no longer myself. That shadow has become a part of me, a part of my mind. And I know that, no matter what I do, I will never escape it. A feeling of suffocation enveloped me, my breath stuck in my throat, making each breath difficult. I quickly reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and turned on the flashlight. The weak beam of light only illuminated a small patch of the floor in front of me, but it was enough for me to feel the strangeness of the space. Every step in the hallway seemed to prolong my tension. The fluorescent bulbs on the ceiling buzzed like insects trapped in a jar, a sickly glow occasionally emitted, revealing lockers, couches, and indistinct gazes. Suddenly, I saw something. A figure, or maybe a shadow, unable to tell, just a blurry shape in the distance. It floated, unlike a normal human standing on two legs. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat seemed to be tapping loudly in my ears. I tried to call but my voice couldn't come out, only the sound of my own panting. The shadow flickered, as if it was moving. In a split second of faint light, it seemed to disappear. The whole space around me became silent. I stood there, paralyzed, unable to move, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Every beat of my heart increased my anxiety, feeling like it was echoing in this quiet space. That shadow was not an illusion, it truly existed. Suddenly, the light returned. Fluorescent lights blinked, illuminating the space. I found myself standing in a hallway of empty lockers. The dressing room is now back to normal, empty as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew I had just witnessed something inexplicable. This strangeness is not due to my imagination. No, it's really happening. Dizziness struck. The world around me felt like it was spinning, and I had to make every effort to keep myself upright and not let myself collapse. I tried to breathe evenly, but my pulse couldn't slow down. I felt like my body was drifting in a dark space, with no support. Fatigue, fear, and anxiety made it impossible for me to stay calm anymore. I staggered out of the dressing room, hastily gathering my things on the bench near the entrance. My hands were shaking, I almost dropped my phone twice trying to put it in my pocket. I couldn't think clearly, there was only one thought repeating in my head: I had to get out of this place, I had to get out of this building as quickly as possible. The automatic door slid open slowly, as if prolonging my wait. When I finally stepped outside, I felt like I had just run a marathon. Even though the night air was fresh and pleasant, I still felt stressed. The freedom of wide-open spaces could not calm my fears. I still couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, feeling like something, or someone, was watching me from behind, through the foggy glass windows. I couldn't explain why I felt this way, but my unease grew stronger. I could feel that presence, even if it was just a vague silhouette from behind. That shadow didn't leave, it was always there, watching me, and I couldn't escape that feeling. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself that it was just stress or my imagination, a part of me still couldn't get rid of the feeling that that shadow was still close, watching every step I took. In the days that followed, I couldn't get rid of that strange feeling. Even though I tried to reason things out, reason couldn't erase the feeling of being watched. Every time I go into the gym, I feel it. Every time I passed through the hallway, I heard whispers, indistinct sounds, as if someone was standing behind me. I couldn't run away, and I knew that presence would never leave me. I don't know if I can live with it forever. But one thing is certain, that shadow, or something, is always following me, not giving me any peace. And when night came, when darkness enveloped me, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Even if I wanted to forget, I couldn't. That shadow is still there, always watching me, in every moment, in every step I take. The emptiness of the gym was like a deep hole, surrounding me, making me feel like I was drowning in an invisible space. This feeling keeps repeating every night, and no matter how rational I am, it still clings to me, not giving me any peace. Maybe I was just too tired, or maybe the new supplements I was taking were making my body feel restless and anxious, or maybe it was all just a hallucination. But every night, while lying in bed, the image of that shadow reappeared, filling my thoughts with the echo of the strange cocoon. That strange sound seemed to destroy all the peace in my head. I felt like I was trapped in an inescapable vortex, where fear kept spinning me in and out. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking in that darkness, something that had flourished in the silent hours. That feeling cannot be expressed in words, but it is always present, always following me. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I decided to share my anxiety with a close friend, who is also my personal trainer. I don't want to talk directly about what happened, just gently offer that I had some strange, inexplicable encounters, and I began to doubt my own sanity. He listened to me patiently, then gently gave a reasonable explanation, as a comfort. He said that maybe it was just the echo chambers in the electrical system that were faulty and that my mind was easily overimpressed. His words seemed reasonable, but I knew that the truth was not that simple. Although there was a part of me that felt relieved to hear these explanations, I also couldn't deny that my fear was still there, always waiting. After a few weeks, I mostly avoided going to the gym at night, instead choosing to work out in the afternoon or early evening, when the facility was busier, filled with the noise of other people. The feeling of safety gradually returned to me as I immersed myself in that bustle, but I couldn't forget that strange feeling. However, my job forced me back to the gym for another late night. And when I walked through the door of the practice room, the memory of that suffocating tension came flooding back, like a fierce wave that swept me in. With every step I took through the overwhelming silence, I listened around, looking for any sign of that presence, strange sounds, whispers that I couldn't explain. I tried to maintain my workout, determined to finish my workout quickly and leave. But every step I took in the hallway made me feel more stressed. As I approached the fountain, where I had stopped to quench my thirst, I felt a strange reluctance. My thirst kept rising, but I couldn't stop feeling uneasy. The sound of water dripping from the fountain echoed in the silent space. The sound was like a soft metal, strange and almost too loud compared to the surrounding silence. Anyone could hear that sound, but in the stillness of the night, it felt like an uninvited invitation. I bent down to fill my water bottle, but at that moment, I felt a change in the air, as if someone was watching me. This feeling is inexplicable, but I know I am not alone. As I left the fountain, the light on the ceiling suddenly flickered, then went out. The gym was completely dark, leaving only a faint shadow in my eyes. Once again, I turned to look, but there was nothing but darkness and silence. My heart pounded in my chest, not because I was afraid of what would happen, but because I knew that shadow, or that invisible presence itself, was there, watching my every move. The gurgling echoed down the hallway. Every time I took a sip of water, that whisper echoed in my mind. That strange Portuguese language kept repeating over and over, as if it had taken root in my mind, unable to be dispelled. My heart was pounding so hard that I felt my ribs tremble, as if an invisible presence was engulfing me. I turned to look, and the door to the men's locker room was still ajar, the darkness behind it like a breathing creature, waiting, urging me to enter. I can't explain it, but there's a strange magnetism that pulls me towards it. A wave of disgust came over me, causing me to resist. Even though curiosity wanted to pull me in, I turned away, refusing to let it control me. The strange feeling became more and more clear, as if someone, or something, was standing behind that door, urging me to enter. A cold feeling ran down my spine, and I couldn't stand it. I left, not going back to get my towel. Every time I passed the gym late at night, I felt an indescribable feeling, an inexplicable fear, something that always followed me. Even though the lights were brightly lit in the room, I still couldn't enter. It feels like everything is enveloped in a wave of tension. That light kept hitting my eyes, making my chest tighten every time I saw it reflected on the glass. But the worst thing was that I couldn't get rid of the strange voice I heard. The voice was both close and far away, as if something inhuman was calling my name from memory. That feeling kept lingering inside me, sending chills down my spine. And I have no reasonable explanation that can allay this fear. It keeps following me, hovering in my head like an inseparable shadow. I couldn't tell anyone clearly what I had been through. No one in the gym mentioned anything unusual, and it seemed like everyone had reached a tacit agreement to ignore the eerie atmosphere in that space, especially at night. The staff there also never mentioned anything wrong. They didn't seem to notice what I felt, or maybe they hadn't experienced the horror I had faced. But I know, I can't explain why. I felt a presence in the darkness, something that was cultivating fear in this space. Even though I can't explain it, I still can't get rid of that feeling. Sometimes I wonder if what I hear is a product of my mind, a stress reaction. Or is there really an entity existing in that locker room? It took over that space, surrounding me. The feeling of it, of that presence, was too strong to be a hallucination. When I close my eyes, I can still feel it, that shadow standing right there, waiting. I heard its breathing, not human breathing, but another breath, full of mystery and danger. And no matter how many times I tried to let my mind control me, I knew that it was more than just a trick of the light. It's real. Whether I wake up during the day or night, that shadow always lingers in my mind. Every time I look in the mirror, I see my reflection, but then the image twists, distorts, as if my shadow is no longer mine. The fear kept increasing, as if I could never escape. I wondered if I was the only one who saw it, or if everyone else felt its presence, as I did. This feeling is inexplicable, but I know that I cannot escape it. I can't go back to the gym without feeling like it's watching me. I couldn't walk through any hallway without feeling invisible eyes staring at me. And I can't sleep peacefully anymore. When I close my eyes, I still hear the whisper, still feel the presence in that darkness. Every night I wake up, my heart is pounding and I'm in a cold sweat. I feel it, the shadow, the invisible creature that no one can see, but I always feel it. And I don't know if I can live with it forever. That night, it all became so clear, and undeniable. What I felt, what I witnessed, changed me forever. Even though I try to go out and live normally, a part of me still cannot forget that darkness, that cold and quiet space. I couldn't turn back, couldn't walk down that flickering hallway alone anymore. Even though I now continued to practice during the day, the ghost of fear still followed me, as if it was waiting for the slightest incident, an echo, or an ill-timed flicker of a light, to send me into a panic attack. Especially when I remember that strange voice, the one I heard in the locker room. It's like an invitation, luring me into the darkness, a darkness that I know that if I step into it, I won't be able to go back to the way it was. The feeling that darkness is not just silence, but could be something lurking, waiting for us. Those thoughts still linger in my mind, unable to be erased. Even though I avoided that space for a long time, I knew I couldn't escape it. Wondering if that shadow in the locker room is real or not. Does something invisible, lurking in the stillness of the night, really exist? It wasn't my hallucination, but something real was waiting in the dark, in those gloomy hallways that I couldn't easily forget. But there's one thing I can't control, curiosity. Even though I tried to stay away, even though I always reminded myself to never go back there, in the end I couldn't give up. One day, a few friends and I decided to go back and explore the abandoned industrial area that we had heard so many rumors about. That feeling of unbridled curiosity, drew us closer. We naively thought it was just a light adventure, nothing would happen. The road leading to that industrial park was cracked and dented, on both sides were fields of tall dry grass, swaying in the wind. The coldness of the atmosphere makes this space even more terrifying. The old chain-link fence, with more holes than intact mesh, was the only barrier between us and another world. The industrial area is deserted, dirty, abandoned, but still exists there like something indestructible. And even though we felt nervous, the first steps into it, I realized that the heavy atmosphere was real, not something to be taken lightly. The stench from abandoned buildings made it impossible for me to breathe normally. A strange feeling rose within me, as if something was following our every step, as if we were intruders in a place we shouldn't be. We kept going, despite everything. But every step seemed like a step into a darkness from which we could not retreat. The darkness enveloped us, the rotten doors and walls seemed to be watching. The feeling in this space made it impossible to breathe, and I realized that I had stepped into a trap from which I could not escape. That darkness, not just in space, but had seeped into my mind. I can't help but think we're not the only ones in this space. Even though there was no one there, the feeling of presence was so strong. An invisible, yet ever-present presence weighed heavily on me, making me feel as if I was being constantly watched. The whole space around me seemed to flow, unpredictable. Strange noises, fleeting figures that I couldn't be sure were real or just my imagination. But I felt it, the constant threat that followed. We were going further, deeper into the darkness from which there was no turning back, and when I turned back, the shadow I had always feared suddenly appeared before me, like a presence I could not avoid. When we decided to enter the wasteland, my mind was not completely ready to face what awaited. We had heard many rumors about this place, about the chemicals that had been processed here, but none of the people we asked had confirmed it. Still, we wanted adventure, we wanted to explore, and so we found a gap in the fence, crawled through it, and continued through the wasteland. The massive building loomed in the darkness, a terrifying landmark in the quiet space. That giant warehouse was like a gloomy mass that suddenly appeared from the other side, like an object that had not been touched for a long time. The roofs were sagging in places, and the large doors hung on rusty hinges as if they hadn't been opened in a long time. When we pushed open one of those doors, the sound of painful rubbing along the concrete floor rang out, like a painful warning from the place itself. That noise revived every cell in my body, making my spine tingle strangely. Entering for the first time, I brought my small flashlight inside. That weak beam of light could only illuminate a few dust particles spinning in the stuffy air. The foul, rancid, sour smell of the place was strong, like the smell of old, spoiled milk, but worse, a mixture of heavy chemicals. My throat itched, my eyes watered, and even though the urge to cough rose in my throat, I couldn't make a sound. The feeling of nausea rose strongly, but I tried to control it and not let the fear overwhelm me. We stood silently in that darkness for a while. I tried to shake off the fear that was gradually spreading through my body. Waiting for the others to follow, I felt something strange. Dan, who always joked to lighten the mood, was no longer laughing as usual. He muttered something about how this might not be as fun as we thought. But we continued anyway. Inside the warehouse, the space becomes even more haunted. Old metal tables, part of a conveyor belt that no longer exists, are piled up in the empty space. Huge vats that once contained industrial liquids were left inanimate. Above, fluorescent lights dangled from bent, cracked fixtures, but of course, they no longer worked. Still, I kept glancing up, half expecting one of those lights to come on. But instead of the sudden light from the bulbs, we only had our weak flashlights, the pale light reaching the dark corners. Occasionally, light shines down from holes in the roof, adding to the desolate look of the place. The strange feeling is increasing. Every time I shine my flashlight through a dark corner, I feel something in the air, as if something is lurking, watching. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were clammy as I held the flashlight. That feeling grew stronger and stronger, an anxiety, an inexplicable fear. The small sounds in that space, creaking metal, drops of water hitting the floor, and the eerie silence all added to my tension. Every step I took, I felt myself sinking deeper and deeper into this stench and gloomy space. This feeling cannot be erased. Fear had ripened inside me, an inexplicable obsession. Every step I took in that gloomy space made me feel like I was trapped in a trap that I couldn't escape from. That darkness is not an empty space, but something vivid, which can be felt in every breath, in every feeling of tension rising in my body. It doesn't give me a chance to stop, to think again. We kept moving in, every step, every sound, made me feel like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't escape from. The story continues to lead the characters into increasingly tense and haunting situations, creating an oppressive psychological space where an invisible presence gradually takes over, making the listener unable to shake off their fear. The feeling of being constantly watched and the psychological challenge makes the listener clearly feel this tension. If you want to continue developing the story in any direction or change details, let me know. The sound of my breathing was pounding in my ears, each breath quick and forceful. I tried to stay quiet, tried to listen for anything else that might be lurking in the thick darkness. It is a hauntingly quiet space. Every sound seemed to be sucked into an invisible abyss. We split up, each in our own direction, seemingly automatically, pulled along like puppets in a dark play. I ran my hand along a rusty piece of metal pipe, the paint peeling off as soon as I touched it, leaving an orange-brown residue on my fingers. I wiped it on my jeans but still couldn't get rid of the uncomfortable feeling. The rust felt like it had stuck to my skin, a mark that couldn't be removed. The sour smell and chemical fumes increased as I got closer to the center of the warehouse. There, a giant machine stood tall, silent, forbidding. Covered in cracked paint, it looked like an abandoned creature, with tangled metal tubes growing from either side. The surrounding floor was stained with something dark and greasy, like a stain that couldn't be erased. In my mind, I told myself it was just old chemicals, but my stomach churned, an inexplicable fear welling up. That feeling, an invisible presence, suddenly came, like someone was standing right behind me. My neck stood up, my heart pounded in my chest, and a drop of cold sweat trickled down my temple. I turned around immediately, shining the flashlight around, my heart tightening. Nothing. There was just a cluster of vertical containers and an abandoned conveyor belt, stretching out into the darkness. I sighed, relieved, telling myself how stupid I was, but the feeling still lingered, as if I had trespassed into the territory of something invisible, and it was still watching me from the edge of my vision. I looked over and saw a friend fiddling with the levers on a broken control panel. He muttered that these levers must have once operated this conveyor belt. The rest of the group began to gather around the machine, exchanging nervous looks, as if everyone sensed the unspoken tension. I wondered if they felt the same as I did, if there was someone in the group who felt the pressure in the air, this invisible presence, the feeling that we didn't belong. We continued deeper into the building, stepping over piles of debris, broken barrels, scrap metal, and tattered industrial tarps. The feeling of heaviness did not let go, the air became more and more difficult to breathe, as if it was pressing on my lungs, suffocating every breath. Every step I take, the deeper I go, the more I feel the grip of this space, as if everything is shrinking, surrounding us in a trap with no way out. The coldness in the air is not the usual stillness, but a coldness that seems to penetrate every layer of skin, every cell in the body. Every step became more and more heavy, my body seemed to be fighting it, but there was nothing I could do. This feeling, the tension, the darkness surrounding me, made me feel like there was no place to escape. In this space, we are no longer explorers. We became intruders in a space that did not belong to us, unable to resist the overwhelming presence. I clearly felt that all my senses were being deceived, being drawn into a space with no way out. The small sounds, the sounds of metal, the hiss of air through gaps, all seemed to create a never-ending chorus. And I, along with my friends, seemed to have fallen into a spiral, unable to escape. That darkness is not just a space, but something conscious, watching our every step, making it impossible for us to shake the feeling of being monitored. And even if I continue, I know clearly that the shadows will always follow me, watching me, waiting for me to enter the darkest corners of this house. The more the story continues, the thicker the atmosphere and the deeper the fear seeps into the characters' minds. The oppressive, haunting atmosphere, with eerie details such as invisible shadows, rusty sounds, and an undeniable presence, makes it impossible for the listener to escape this psychological spiral. The feeling of fear not only comes from the physical space but also from the psychological feelings that are invading the character. This place is not just a location, but a spiritual challenge, one that the character cannot escape, no matter how hard he tries. Approaching the back of the warehouse, we found a block of boarded-up offices, the glass windows so dirty that it was impossible to see inside without wiping off the thick layer of mud from them. Even though I felt an inexplicable hesitation, I still decided to use my sleeve to wipe a small stain on the glass window. The beam of the flashlight shined into the interior space, revealing a cramped room, filled with filing cabinets and desks in disarray, chairs knocked over, with drawers pulled wide open, documents scattered across the floor. The sour smell of chemicals and waste grew stronger near this office area, making my eyes water and my stomach churn. It felt like something was leaking from the walls, polluting the surrounding air, as if it was penetrating my body little by little. I felt movement out of the corner of my eye, a glimpse of darkness on the other side of the dirty glass. My heart stopped, my breath caught in my throat. My pulse was pounding in my ears, the sound of my own breathing was like a hiss in that quiet space. Startled, I turned the flashlight towards it, but nothing. There was only the dim reflection of our group in the dirty glass, our faces looking much more worried than when we first arrived. Trying to reassure myself, I told myself that it was just an illusion caused by the light, but I couldn't dispel the creepy feeling crawling up the back of my neck. We left the office, decided it was time to leave this place, turned around and looked for the exit we hadn't noticed at first. However, even though we had been walking for more than 30 minutes, it felt like it had lasted for hours. My mouth was so dry that I had to swallow continuously to keep from closing it, trying not to let that fear cloud my reason. One of my friends whispered in tension that the chemical smell became even stronger, rising even more instead of dissipating. He wondered if there was a chemical spill deep in this building. Another person in the group suggested we leave immediately, but curiosity still fought with our uneasiness. Even though it felt like we were running away, we decided to continue on a complete loop, hoping that it would help us understand the place better, instead of letting fear take over. But the more we walked, the stronger the feeling of being watched, as if something invisible was still quietly following us. That feeling, of being watched, became more and more evident. With every step we took, I felt this space becoming heavier and heavier. The huge machines, silent and motionless, seemed no longer inanimate objects, but waiting creatures. They loom large in the darkness, threatening our every step, creating a powerful invisible energy. Each darkness is as thick as a life, a force that can touch us if we take one wrong step. The feeling of fear continued to overwhelm me, and my breathing became sporadic and difficult. Every muscle in my body tensed, every sensitive nerve sprang to life, reacting to inexplicable tension. We continued walking, but each step seemed to push us deeper into a space from which we could not escape. We were no longer people exploring an abandoned place, we had become the hunted, besieged in a space where the life had been drained, and fear was overwhelming every part of us. Every step, every small sound, reflects the panting and tension in each group member. This darkness is not a mere presence, but something alive, purposeful, always watching and waiting for us to get lost in it. The more we walked, the more we felt its intrusion into our minds and bodies. This space doesn't just make us afraid of what might happen, it also makes us doubt ourselves. Are we hallucinating, or is there really some force controlling us? That sour smell couldn't go away, it burned my nostrils and stuck in my throat. With each next step, we entered a long hallway, filled with tall racks, once containing equipment or spare parts, now mostly lying toppled on empty shelves, or strewn with debris. My flashlight passed over distorted shapes that looked as if they had melted, congealed into inexplicable lumps. A feeling of dread rose in my stomach, cold, unrelenting. Is this the result of some chemical reaction or something else entirely? This uncertainty makes me even more confused. As we approached the exit, one of the group suggested we regroup and go the rest of the way without separating. We formed a tight cluster of flashlights, overlapping each other to create a larger circle of illumination, as if each of us needed protection within this very enclosure. Beams of light flickered along the walls and ceiling to reveal rusty, dirty streaks that looked almost like veins spreading across the metal surface, so haunting that it was impossible to look at them for long without feeling scared. Each time we passed another piece of old machinery, I strained my hearing for any sign of movement behind us. The silence became heavy, pressing on my eardrums, as if there was nothing but heavy air, until I wished I could hear even the slightest noise, to break the tension. But the only sound I could make out was my own panicked breathing. After a while, the sour smell subsided, and was replaced by a cool breeze flowing in from a set of large relief double doors. My breathing was relieved, it felt like I could see the outline of the exit in the faint light outside. My pounding heart urged me forward, the oppressive feeling from the building seemed to loosen its grip a little. But as we got closer, I felt like the whole building was exhaling some foul breath, a cold wind coming. That stench rushed up and hit us in the face like a physical blow, causing all our senses to become numb. It was the most horrible smell I have ever experienced, making my knees wobble and my body struggle to keep from collapsing. My friends uttered muffled curses, trying to cover their mouths and noses as if the place didn't want us to leave without a final assault on our senses. A wave of nausea hit me so hard that I had to lean on a rusty cabinet for balance, but even that didn't help. It felt as if the building itself was fighting to keep us from escaping. Every step, every breath, I feel like I'm hitting an invisible wall, preventing us from moving forward, preventing us from escaping this darkness, this haunting silence. But I couldn't stop. I continued walking in a daze, the stench still wrapped around my body. The flashlight still shines dimly, creating brief shadows on the wall, adding to the feeling that something is lurking in the darkness. Every step, every wind, I felt an invisible movement, as if this building was alive, watching us, not letting us escape. That feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was something I couldn't get out of my mind, no matter how hard I tried to explain it. I felt the slowness of my steps, the heaviness of each movement, as if the entire building was sucking the life out of me, making it impossible for me to continue any longer. The feeling of fear filled my mind, making me unable to turn back, unable to stop. But I know one thing for sure, I can't escape this place, I can't escape the darkness that haunts me. And when we finally walked out that door, I no longer felt relief but just a terrible slump, as if we had left a part of ourselves behind in that darkness. Fear continues to follow us, never seeming to let go, like a part of darkness ingrained in each of our minds. The outdoor air, although fresh, still could not dispel the heavy, gloomy feeling of what we had gone through. And no matter how hard we try to separate ourselves from that past, I know that the darkness will continue to follow us, always waiting for a moment to pull us back to the place it never truly let us leave. My flashlight clattered to the ground, rolling several feet. A faint beam of light fell on one of the broken machines, illuminating the space below it at an odd angle. In that moment, I thought I saw something moving there, some shape that wasn't part of the machine. My vision blurred and I blinked violently, feeling like something viscous, trembling, moving in the dim light. It seemed to disappear as soon as I tried to focus on it. Fear was like an electric current running through my body, making me unable to stand. Forcing myself to stand up straight, I took back my flashlight and determined to rejoin the group. No one said it directly, but I could see the extreme fear in their eyes. We didn't need to say a word to understand that we had to leave. The feeling of fear spread between us like a disease. With every step we took we tried to stay calm, but my heart was pounding in my chest and my breathing became rapid. I gulped, feeling sweat trickle down my back, chilling my skin in the damp air. The closer we got to the double doors, the more the air seemed to swirl around us in an oppressive dance, the shadows lengthening and distorting, transforming the mechanical shapes into monstrous silhouettes. My flashlight flashed again and I almost lost my temper. I told myself I had to stay alert, I had to go out, I had to escape this place. Meanwhile, I saw a sliver of dark sky, a vague promise of escape from this suffocating darkness. But I know, every step is a step closer to freedom, even though it feels like something is still lurking in the darkness behind us. When we finally reached the threshold, I could barely breathe. My lungs felt burned by the stench of chemicals. My nerves were so tense that I felt the pursuit of silent shadows, as if they were following our every step. When I crossed the threshold, I felt like I had just passed from one reality to another. The night air was cold, but I immediately felt relieved that it was a blessing compared to what we had just experienced in the warehouse. Even though I stepped outside, I still didn't feel completely comfortable. The sour smell of the air clung to my clothes and hair, but there was still a heavy feeling in my heart. The warehouse still loomed behind us, its jagged shape framed by moonlight. I still felt my heart pounding, cold sweat covered my forehead. When I turned around and looked towards the exit, I felt like that same darkness was watching us, not letting us go even though we were out. We stood there, all silent, no one dared to speak. In the air, there was a heavy silence, not peaceful but threatening. I couldn't shake that feeling, as if the darkness hadn't left us. The invisible presence still lingered, watching us from afar. Can we really escape it? Or is this darkness just waiting for the right moment to return, continuing to hunt us, drawing us back to the place where fear has never truly let go? Even though I tried to leave that oppressive space, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching me. The flashlight shined back at the open door, and for a moment I thought I saw a faint movement inside. It was as if something receded into the darkness, leaving me with a solid and creepy feeling. In this place, there is something beyond our understanding, something dark and scary exists under this ground. One of my friends commented, "We should go home," and another added, "We should never go back." Those words echoed in my mind, like a tacit consensus in the group. We started walking, but the feeling of being watched never left us. The thick atmosphere of the warehouse seemed to cling to us, covering us with every step. My heart pounded as I kept glancing over my shoulder, my eyes starting to see faint movements in the periphery of my vision. Our steps became hurried, as if we were running away from something invisible. That feeling became even more intense as we approached the fence, where the night breeze brought some freshness, but my body was drenched in sweat, my hands shaking with tension. I realized my body was covered in goosebumps, my nerves tense in that silence. Everything around became blurry, there was no sound, only a feeling of insecurity repeating in my head. I couldn't stop imagining shadows moving, lurking in every dark corner. Could I really see them, or was it just my imagination and fear? We parted without saying a word, each carrying invisible fear home. When I entered the room, I threw myself down on the bed, but my clothes were still wet with sweat, and the stench still haunted my mind. I couldn't shake the images of the dark warehouse corners, the ghostly flickering movements, and the suffocating silence that felt like a constant threat. Every time I close my eyes, I feel that presence near me, lurking in the corners of my imagination or perhaps somewhere else. Sleep came to me, but it was a restless sleep. I dreamed of endless corridors extending from that warehouse, each leading deeper into the darkness, and each time I turned a corner I felt a shape slithering out of sight. The sound of my footsteps echoed far away in my dream, but each step made me feel even deeper into a maze with no way out. The hallway in the dream stretched endlessly, dark and stuffy. Every corner I turned, I felt something hovering behind me, watching me from the darkness. I can't escape, it's like I'm being pulled into a vortex with no way to escape. Each step only increased my fear. And then, for brief moments, I saw the figure, not human, but like something larger, darker. The sound of footsteps echoed more and more clearly, the fear inside me rose like a wave. That feeling, that presence, couldn't escape me, like part of a dream I couldn't wake up from. And when I woke up, I could only hear my rapid breathing, the feeling of suffocation and fear had not left me. I wondered if I could truly escape it, or if that darkness was forever ingrained in my mind. This presence, even though I cannot see it, continues to follow me wherever I go. Like a never-ending nightmare, I began to wonder if these nightmares were warnings or simply my mind reacting with overwhelming fear. However, I cannot deny that the darkness I have experienced will never leave me. It is still there, silently lurking in the dark corners of my imagination. And no matter what I try, a part of me will always feel like something is never completely gone. As I ran slowly in the dark, my heart beat so violently that I thought it would burst. When I suddenly woke up, my body was covered in sweat and my breathing was panting. The darkness in the bedroom seemed thick, but at least I knew I was far away from that cursed place. The feeling of fear still clings to me, like a nightmare that never ends. I tried to find a way to explain it, but all efforts were in vain. A few days later, I tried discussing it with Dan, hoping to find an explanation for our strange experience. He gently brushed it off at first, but then admitted that he had been feeling strangely paranoid since the night of our discovery. He didn't go into too much detail, just vaguely mentioning not being able to sleep well and seeing things out of the corner of his eye. I confided that I was experiencing similar concerns. We both agreed that we shouldn't turn back, not wanting to find out if the invisible presence could manifest itself more specifically. Even though we gave up and never returned, the fear persisted with me. Every night, I feel that presence, as if it is still watching me from hidden corners. I cannot fully explain what we encountered in that abandoned industrial park. Perhaps the chemicals left behind fooled our senses, distorting perception and causing hallucinations. But I also couldn't get past the thought that maybe some other force had claimed the warehouse as its domain, feeding on the fear and curiosity of the unwary. That explanation made me feel even more scared. The following days and weeks were a series of sporadic waves of claustrophobia, a nagging feeling that I was being watched. My imagination or whatever clings to me refuses to give me peace. Every night, when the wind howled outside, I smelled that sour smell, and my heart pounded, my palms became slippery. A chill ran down my spine, sending me reeling from the memory of that bleak hallway of destruction. The strangest thing is that none of us ever reported any physical problems. There was no mysterious illness, no shoes rotting from a chemical spill, no tangible evidence that this place had physically harmed us. There was only a mental residue, a fear imprinted in our minds. It was a fear that we could not escape, no matter how hard we tried to continue our normal lives. Late at night, I still wonder if it is invisible, a presence that cannot be touched, cannot be seen, but can be felt, taking over every sense. The fear we carried with us after that journey was not something that could be simply dismissed. It was deeply ingrained in my mind, like a ghost that always followed me, a nightmare that never ended. And perhaps, that was the only thing we truly brought back from that abandoned industrial park, an invisible presence that still haunted us, even though we had left it. The presence found a way to follow us home, silent and invisible, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I kept quiet about the incident, mostly only discussing it with those present that day. We had an unspoken agreement that we would never go back to exploring abandoned places again. Not because we fear the floor might break or our hands get tetanus, but because there are places in the world where there is a thin veil where something beyond reason or science can lurk. After that night, I was no longer the same person. My nerves are more tense, I fear that my sense of security is always in doubt. I couldn't see the shadows the same way as before. Even the simplest shapes, cast on the wall, can make my pulse race if I'm not careful. Whenever I smell that sour smell in the air, even if it's just a waft of smoke from some distant chemical, I find my thoughts pulled back to the towering rusted machines and invisible eyes in the darkness. The memory sent shivers through my body, reminding me that I felt completely helpless. I suppose I'm grateful that we left that warehouse physically, unscathed. But the mental scars are still etched into the corners of my subconscious. Sometimes in the wee hours of the night, I wonder if the worst horror is the one that never fully emerges and hides out of sight, drifting in the suffocating air and waiting for the unknown. That makes any shadow ominous, any unexplained noise a threat, and any stench a silent promise of something more disturbing. I've kept this story to myself long enough that it feels like a permanent secret, whispering endlessly in my ear whenever I let my guard down. And even though I try to rationalize everything, telling myself it's just chemicals, or old machinery, or an overactive imagination, there's a part of me that knows the truth lies beyond those superficial explanations. There was something, hungry, angry, or simply unfamiliar. It reached me, still waiting, still watching from the shadows. I can't escape the feeling that something is lurking in a corner, quietly observing me, always waiting for the right moment to reappear. This feeling not only follows me in my sleep, but also follows me in the most peaceful moments, when I am simply alone, in my room, like shadows in the gym, quietly moving in dark corners, just waiting for the light to go out to continue my work. This fear is not something that can be easily explained, it has become a part of me, a dark part of my mind that I cannot get rid of. And every night, when the darkness covers me, I wonder if I'm truly out of it, or if it's still waiting, just one more step, one sudden movement, for me to realize that I was never truly out of it. That night's mind left a trace of fear, ensuring that I will never forget the feeling of my heart pounding in my chest, as we trespassed into a forbidden land from which we would never return. I had no intention of stepping foot in that abandoned building again. Even the memory of the thick air and nauseating stench still haunted me, making my mouth dry and my heart rate sometimes quicken in quieter moments. I wondered if that presence still waited among the rusted machines, moving in the darkness, listening for the sounds of intruders. And if that's the case, maybe we're the lucky ones. It may never be seen or understood, but the knowledge that it exists, or could exist, is enough to keep me on edge every time I pass a crumbling structure. Because once you feel that suffocating air and feel the living, breathing darkness weighing on your mind, there's no going back to blissful ignorance. You carry your fear with you like a foul secret, haunting you with every breath. I first felt something was wrong the day I entered that narrow, dimly lit hallway. The stuffy air clung to my body, my skin crawled with goosebumps and an inexplicable chill ran down my spine. By the time I turned the key to the apartment door, there was something about the silence of the building that felt unnatural, like a forced silence, rather than a peaceful quiet. Even before I noticed the flashing lights or heard the mysterious echo of footsteps, I felt as if I was trespassing into a place that did not welcome my presence. This structure is an old building in the city center, with high ceilings and long corridors that deceive the eye at night. The shadows cast by the single overhead lamp seemed to stretch out, clinging unnaturally to the walls, as if they had a life of their own. When I first walked through this place, it looked quite ordinary and the paint was peeling in a few places. I thought I could get used to this space. It has an ideal location, perfect for my work habits, and the rent is surprisingly affordable. But now, every time I walk in, I feel a nagging uneasiness, as if some part of the building is watching me, waiting for me to do something wrong, or simply waiting to reveal itself again. The following nights, I couldn't escape that uncomfortable feeling, the feeling that somewhere in the room, in the dark hallway, might be quietly observing me. Every step I took on the old wooden floor made the air thicker. The light from the flashing lights is never strong enough to dispel the darkness, even a little. I began to hear strange noises, small sounds that echoed inside me, as if something was moving slightly in the space around me. Sometimes, I thought I heard faint breathing sounds, as if someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, but there was only my own shadow reflected on the wall, the shadow becoming longer and distorted, making me feel like I was being watched. A few days later, I still can't get those images out of my head. Every night, when I close the apartment door, I can't stop thinking about the shadow in the old dressing room, about the stuffy air in the long dark hallways. It not only follows me in my sleep, but also stays in every space I pass through, as if that presence is watching me, waiting for the moment to return. I don't know if I'm going crazy or what, but there's a part of me, some dark part, that knows I've trespassed into something I can't understand, and that shadow is still following me, forever. Every night, my apartment became a tense space, where darkness not only covered my physical body but also crept into my mind. The wooden floors creaked and there was a lingering musty smell, making me feel like I was choking on the age of the building. Although I tried to convince my friends that this apartment was charming and full of character, I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was going on. And then, one day, I started noticing signs that I couldn't explain. At first, I just thought it was an electrical problem. The hallway lights started flashing, not occasionally, but constantly. The frantic flickering made the walls seem to ripple, as if they were alive, watching me. I replaced the light bulb, bought a brand new one, hoping that would be the solution. But even though I replaced the light with a new one, the light still flickered and then turned off completely. When I got up to check, it lit up again, as if it was toying with me. I convinced myself that it was just a simple problem of the old electrical system, that the apartment hadn't been renovated in so long, but part of me couldn't ignore the feeling that there was something wrong, something lurking behind this phenomenon. These little signs kept appearing, persistently, as if teasing me, forcing me to pay attention to them. A few weeks later, things started to get worse. I started hearing sounds at night. At first, they were just very small sounds, but they became clearer and clearer, like the sound of creaking floorboards or the sound of door hinges closing in the distance. I was startled awake by a small creaking sound, my heart pounding in my ears. This feeling couldn't be extinguished, no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that it was just the normal sounds of an old apartment. My apartment is on the 3rd floor, so I eliminated the possibility of stray cats on the balcony or noise from the street. That sound was not from the outside world, but from this apartment itself. The sounds were like footsteps, with a steady rhythm, as if someone was moving about the living room, gently but firmly. Those steps made me feel cold, as if someone was right behind me. I tried to be rational, to protect myself from paranoid thoughts, but my mind could not be at peace. It felt like something was lurking in the dark, watching me from inside my own room. There were times when I lay in bed, trying to stand still, not moving, just to hear those strange sounds. My own shadow on the wall also seemed to become more strange, as if it was no longer just a reflection but could move, could change. Every time the lights flashed, I felt like they were looking for me, following my every move. Every little noise seemed like a warning, a call from the darkness, forcing me to face something I couldn't explain. The footsteps, the whispers, the flashing lights, they all evoked a haunting feeling in me, as if I couldn't escape it, couldn't leave this place. This feeling of being watched never left me. It is a part of me, of this apartment. I used to think that it was just the old walls and the electrical system, but now I know that there is something deeper and scarier that exists in these hidden corners. Every night, when I turn off the lights and lie in the dark, I can still feel it, that invisible presence, always waiting, always ready to reveal itself. And even though I can't see it, I know it's there. The night became a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Every night, I was tormented by inescapable feelings of being watched, by inexplicable shadows, by invisible sounds that strained all my senses. Although I tried to do everything I could to feel safe, all my efforts were in vain. More than once I mustered up the courage to get out of bed to check the living room. My steps felt like they were dragging on the ground, my palms were sweaty, my heart was beating so fast it felt like it was about to burst. Each step made me feel more and more that there was something waiting for me in the darkness. The vague shadow of a presence that I couldn't see, but felt very clearly. When I approached the hallway light switch and pressed the button, I prayed that it would light up, but as always, it had no response at all. The lights flickered strangely and then turned on, making me feel like I was losing my mind. I remember making sure to turn it off before going to bed. The hallway light is only a small piece of this puzzle, but it's enough to make me unable to shake off the feeling of frustration. I called an electrician to check the electrical system. He went around the apartment, did an inspection and told me everything was fine. He shrugged, looking confused, not knowing how to explain. But his confusion did not reassure me. The light continued to flicker and, each night, the footsteps became louder. I swear I felt the floor shake slightly as if heavy shoes were walking on it, right outside my bedroom door. Sleep has become a luxury. Every time I lay down, my body was so tense that every muscle ached, and my neck was stiff with tension. My heart was pounding in my ears, as fast as a drum, and I couldn't stop thinking that something terrible was waiting for me in the dark. One night, I thought I saw a figure passing at the end of the hallway. It was just a fleeting shadow, but it was enough to take my breath away. I couldn't be sure whether it was real or just my imagination, but I knew that every hair on my body stood up, and cold sweat ran down my back. A feeling of despair engulfed me. I tried sleeping with all the lights on, hoping that the light would dispel the darkness and all that lurks in it. But even though I did that, I still couldn't escape that feeling, an invisible presence that I couldn't explain. Darkness not only covered the space, but also invaded my mind, making it impossible for me to find peace, no matter how hard I tried. The feeling that something is still there, lurking in the darkness, hasn't left me. The light cannot make me feel safe, because I know that the darkness is always there, right behind me. Every night, I went back in my mind, remembering the strange footsteps in the stifling darkness of the warehouse, of the invisible sounds that were always present, even though I couldn't see them. Fear had bitten into my mind, and now, nothing could dispel that feeling, that something in the darkness was watching me, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Knowing that no one would believe me. He couldn't understand that there was something invisible lurking in the darkness of this building, something that could come from another dimension, a parallel dimension, where darkness was not just a lack of light but a refuge of fear. I ignored his disbelieving look and left the manager's office, feeling as heavy as a shadow following me down the long, narrow hallway. Since moving here, I've started to feel a change in the way I look at things. Every space, every corner of my apartment, every smallest sound, seemed to carry an invisible threat. The feeling like someone was staring at me never left me, as if I was a prey being hunted in my own home. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I feel like my reflection isn't even mine anymore. One evening, while reading a book, I suddenly heard a light knock. At first I thought it was just the sound of water dripping from somewhere in the apartment. But then, the knocking came again, this time clearly, as if someone was standing outside my door, just waiting for the moment to enter. I swallowed hard, my heart pounded, but when I looked through the hole in the door, there was no one. The hallway outside was empty, only the weak hallway light illuminated the path, flickering continuously. The tension continued to increase within me, making me feel as if the very space around me was shrinking, suffocating all my conscious thoughts. Every time I step out of my room, it feels like I'm trespassing into a world where I don't belong, a place that has been taken over by an invisible force, invisible but clearly felt. The flickering lights weren't just an electrical problem, but part of something bigger, part of an unfinished story that I couldn't escape. I tried changing my habits, not staying long in the apartment, but every time I went out, I felt that presence like a shadow always following me. No matter where I go, I always feel someone is watching me, standing silently behind me, a presence just waiting for me to appear. Every time I return to the apartment, I feel like I'm stepping into a trap, a space where darkness and dim lights intertwine to create invisible traps that I can't seem to clearly feel. With each passing night, I felt more and more invaded. My mind seemed to be being cleansed by confusing memories, haunting shadows that could not be dispelled. I tried to reason everything out, convincing myself that it was all just stress-induced paranoia. But every night, as darkness falls and the lights begin to flicker, I know I can't turn off that fear, can't turn off that terrifying presence. And then, in that moment of silence, when all sounds seemed to disappear, leaving only the sound of my own breathing, I felt that this might never end. The feeling of being watched has become a part of my life, an inseparable part. And I can't help but wonder, are there really invisible forces that can take over space, take over our minds, wait in the dark, just to make it impossible for us to leave? So loud it almost made me fall out of bed. The noise came from outside the hallway, a sound like a heavy cabinet being pushed or something large hitting the wall. My head felt like it was about to explode. My heart was pounding so hard I could almost feel each beat entering into my ears. I jumped up from the bed, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and I immediately rushed into the hallway, my legs heavy, each step like entering another world. My bedroom door opened, the hallway light was still shimmering, but this time I could feel the heavy tension in the air. I stepped out, my eyes trying to get used to the dim darkness ahead. Everything seemed dangerously still, except for the gently flickering lights. I walked step by step, listening, waiting for the next sound, but there was only silence as a challenge. Every corner of the hallway was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling as if something was watching me from somewhere, hidden in the darkness. My face was drenched in cold sweat, and my palms were wet. Every step I take on the wooden floor makes the space around me seem heavier. I clearly felt every creak of wood under my feet, like the sounds were threatening to swallow me whole. I looked around and suddenly felt a cold wind blowing, carrying a foul smell, as if something hadn't been cleaned for a long time. My shadow was twisted on the wall, stretched and distorted, as if I was no longer me. I can't understand this feeling, I can't explain it. Just know that, As soon as I tried to look straight ahead, a dark, faint shadow flashed across the corner of my eye. I turned around, the hallway light flashed, and I was almost certain I saw a shape, a silhouette, faint but clear. A feeling of guilt and confusion rose within me, a feeling like I had just violated something taboo. I stood dumbfounded, with only silence surrounding me. Then the sound rang out again, from nowhere, not footsteps, but a sound like a gentle, long sigh, as if someone was waiting in the dark. This feeling, this relentless surveillance, made me unable to move, unable to breathe. My eyes were glued to the dim lights in the hallway, feeling like I was trapped in my own apartment. I realized that this space, even though it has full light, still cannot erase the feeling of threat, cannot eliminate the feeling that someone is watching me in the dark. My mind was confused. I couldn't understand why I let myself stay here for so long. The shadows weren't just shadows anymore. It seemed like some dark spirit had taken possession of this space, and it never let me go. I backed away, walking slowly, but then stopped when I realized I couldn't go back. I couldn't leave. All I could do was stand there, motionless, in the still black night, feeling that presence in the air, waiting for something bad to happen. When I woke up, my body was stiff and my breathing was rapid, as if I had never truly rested. Even though I tried to shake that feeling off, it still stuck with me like a ghost. Every night I dream of that long, deep hallway, where dim lights flicker, and doors slam shut in endless darkness, as if inviting me back, but also pushing me further away. Every dream is like a whisper of something that can never escape sight. I stood up, trying to calm my mind, but the shadows and strange footsteps in my apartment did not disappear. My friend's hallway light didn't flicker, there wasn't any strange noises, but the silence made me even more nervous. I couldn't sleep peacefully, couldn't relax completely. Everything I had experienced in my apartment, in that hallway, was coming back to me. I remember standing in front of my living room door, staring into space in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest, as if an invisible force was pulling me there. A cold wind blew through the door, bringing with it a foul smell that I couldn't explain. My breathing became heavy, my throat tight. Even though I tried to let go of that feeling of fear, everything continued to haunt me, becoming more and more clear. That feeling, the feeling of someone always watching me, has now become a part of me. When I stepped outside, the outdoor light seemed insufficient to dispel the darkness in my mind. I looked towards the window, saw my reflection, couldn't recognize myself in it. It's me, but it's not me. Some shape, unrecognizable, was crossing my mind every time I tried to forget for a while. It felt as if there was something there, in the darkness, waiting for me. But I can't bear it anymore. I can't let it continue to control my mind. The last time I walked out of my apartment, I didn't look back. It's not because I'm afraid, but because I know that one day that presence will return, a day when the darkness won't just be darkness anymore. It will be a part of me forever. With an uncontrollable power. My eyes never left the shadowy figure as it moved quickly through the hallway. At first I thought it was just an illusion, but the closer I got, the more I felt its presence, as if this darkness could touch me. That figure seemed to be a human, but it wasn't, not in the way we understand humans. The damp and metallic smell became even stronger, as if this house contained not only old objects but also a place containing horrifying and inexplicable secrets. My steps, although shaky, continued to approach that figure. The footsteps echoed as if entering another space, a space that had been cut off from my reality. A heavy feeling overwhelmed me, as if an invisible force was pulling me into the darkness. The living room door in front of me was wide open, but I couldn't enter, as if there was some force stopping me. I turned around, trying to run away, but my legs couldn't move, as if the ground had turned into something sticky, holding me back. I couldn't breathe, my throat was tight, cold sweat ran down my body. At that moment, I heard a whisper, a low and hoarse voice, as if from deep underground. "Don't go," the voice said, making me freeze. My eyes opened wide, staring at the darkness ahead, but only saw endless flashing lights. I couldn't move, couldn't do anything other than stand there. It felt like a force was taking over my body. My steps were no longer mine. My body seemed to be controlled by a force beyond my control. I entered the darkness. I could no longer see anything but a black blade, and that whisper still lingered in space. Every step was like a stumble in the unknown. Every breath seemed the last. The coldness in the space pervades, filled with silence. Suddenly, the light in the hallway lit up again, as if it were testing me again, inviting me to turn back. My eyes blurred. All I could feel was that darkness, the scream of something clinging to me, waiting for me, just when I felt I couldn't take it anymore. That feeling still sticks with me, unable to be erased from my mind. Every time I passed by, I couldn't help but look towards the building, as if there was an invisible tide pulling me towards it. The flickering light bulbs and strange footsteps kept echoing in my mind. I knew well, I was physically out of it, but a part of me, deep in my subconscious, still felt that presence. Every night, when I fall asleep, I sometimes hear strange sounds, a gentle noise, like a whisper, that makes me wake up and sit up in a corner. The light on the ceiling flickered again, and I felt like someone was standing right outside the door. My eyes glued to a long shadow that I couldn't see clearly, something that made me unable to breathe, unable to speak. Then one night, when I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to come back, not because I wanted to learn about it, but because I couldn't stand this feeling anymore. The feeling of being constantly watched. I returned to the old apartment, walked through the long hallway, where everything seemed to have changed, but it seemed like it had never changed. The darkness was still the same, and the light in that hallway was still flickering. That feeling, the tension in the air, was not due to the electrical system or the building structure. It is something else, something that cannot be touched, cannot be seen, but can be clearly felt. I couldn't find an explanation, but the fear still clung to me, like a ghost that couldn't be erased. This time I stood outside my apartment, clutching the doorknob. The dim light of the hallway light once again made my heart pound. I don't know if I have the courage to go back inside, but I can't ignore that strange feeling. A strange urge made me enter, and as the door closed behind me, I knew that whether I wanted to or not, I would never be able to escape that presence. I can't explain this feeling, but I know that this place has changed me forever. The fear I felt could not be extinguished by any reason. And when I look back at those walls, at those lights, I know that nothing can erase the haunting memories of what I felt that dark night. The invisible presence is still here, still waiting, and I cannot escape it. The suffocating feeling grew thicker and thicker, as if the space around me had begun to shrink, weighing me down. I held my breath, trying to listen, but there was only the sound of my own breathing echoing in the wall, in the cramped space. Darkness enveloped the room, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing right there, listening to my every move, watching my every breath. Suddenly, a small noise rang out from behind me, a light sound, almost like a small gust of wind. I turned around, but there was nothing, just darkness surrounding me, emptiness. My heart felt empty, feeling overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. I can't explain why I feel this way. Maybe it was stress, but in the back of my mind, a part of me knew it wasn't just my imagination. I continued working, my hands shaking, trying to stop for a moment to catch my breath, but my breathing became rapid. Every step I took felt like I was stepping into an invisible trap. Every little noise, every movement in the air startled me. The darkness was not just a physical thing, it was as if it could live, could feel me. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was just tired and stressed from work, but there was no denying that something strange was happening. Shadows flashed by, strange noises kept coming, as if I was in an invisible maze where I couldn't escape. Then, another sound rang out, this time clearer. The gentle rustle of footsteps on the tiled floors. I turned around, my heart pounding, but saw no one. There's no one standing behind me. But why do I feel so clear? Why do I feel like someone is standing right behind me, just a few steps away? That feeling of fear enveloped me. I stood still, not daring to move. I know I have to leave. I have to run away from this place, but my body refuses to listen. I could only stand there, helpless, as the darkness became more and more overwhelming, covering the space around me. And in that space, I felt an invisible presence, something watching me, waiting, and I couldn't escape it. Finally, I decided to leave the basement. I walked up the stairs, walking with a heavy heart, as if each step I took was dragging an invisible ghost. By the time I stepped out the door, the light from outside could not ease the feeling of frustration that still clung to me. But I know one thing, I can't go back to that place anymore. During the day, when I'm working, when I walk through the hallway or sit in the living room, sometimes a strange feeling makes me stop and look toward the basement door. It felt like something was lurking in the darkness below, waiting, watching me from afar. Sometimes I start hearing strange noises, unclear, but clear enough that I can't ignore them. This feeling lasted all week, like an obsession that couldn't be shaken off. One night, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I heard a small whisper, coming from somewhere, as if someone was trying to speak to me. The sound wasn't clear enough to explain, but I could feel the tension in the air. My heart was pounding. I lay still, not daring to move, afraid that if I did, I would encounter something I didn't want to see. Then, another night, when I was tired and almost giving up, I heard a noise from behind the basement door. This time it wasn't as gentle as the previous times. This was a knocking sound, but strong and clear, as if something was trying to push the door open, looking for a way out of the darkness. I sat up straight, my heart pounding, my hands covered in cold sweat. I didn't dare look at the door, but the light reflecting off the hallway made it inevitable that I could sense the presence of something beyond my sight. I can't continue living like this. Every night, I look forward to something, not peace but fear that will pull me back into that world, where the shadows never go away, where those feelings always stick with me, like a scar that cannot heal. And every waking night, no matter how hard I try to sleep, a part of me knows that darkness is still somewhere, almost right outside the door. Entering the basement, it felt like I was entering a separate space where nothing lay, only darkness and strange silence remained. The light from the hallway light above didn't seem strong enough to break through the thick darkness surrounding me. With every step I took, the concrete floor beneath my feet echoed with heavy sounds, as if reacting to my presence. I turned to look at the door that had closed behind me, and in that moment, I felt as if something was still watching me in the darkness behind. My heart beats faster, every breath feels heavy and uncomfortable. My whole body was tense, ready to face something, though I couldn't say what it was. I tried to walk quickly through the basement area, my eyes always looking forward, not daring to look back. Every light bulb, every shadow added to the feeling that this space was a trap that I had caught myself in. Old filing cabinets, abandoned tools of unknown origin, all silently witnessed my presence. I felt trapped in a nightmare from which I could not escape. Suddenly, a noise rang out from the darkest corner of the room, an unidentifiable noise. The sound of metal hitting each other. I stood motionless, my body drenched in cold sweat. It wasn't an accidental noise from an object. It's intentional. There was something there, in the darkness, that I couldn't see, but could clearly feel. I turned around, took a deep breath and walked out quickly, but that feeling still stuck with me. The feeling of being watched never left, like a ghost was always by my side, always ready to pounce on me as soon as I let my guard down. No matter how fast I walked, the feeling of being blocked, imprisoned in this very space remained, like something invisible, but strong and unescapable. When I went upstairs and closed the basement door behind me, I felt like I had just escaped something terrible. But the fear still did not go away. Late at night, when I'm alone, I still feel the darkness of this house that never lets go. Even though I left the basement, even though I closed the door and stepped out of that space, I couldn't dispel the heavy feeling that still clung to me. My new apartment didn't make me feel as safe as I expected. Quiet nights still startled me, the flickering light kept me from sleeping, and every time I walked through the hallway, I glanced over my shoulder, always feeling like something was watching me, even though I knew I was far from it. Many times I wondered if everything was just a delusion, if I was so stressed that I imagined everything. But every night, the memories of the thick shadows, of strange footsteps, of invisible presences, returned, as if something never really left. Noises, flickering lights, foul smells. Perhaps I had entered an area of space that I should never trespass, where there are things beyond our understanding. A place where an unexplainable presence always exists, lurking in the shadows, and just waiting for a moment of weakness, a small mistake to appear. Something dark, untouchable, but felt every time I was near it. And I wonder, are those shadows, those footsteps, are they something bad, waiting for me to return, waiting for me to return to that place, the place I couldn't completely escape from? Or maybe, just maybe, I will never truly escape that place, which I trespassed on again and again, always leaving its mark on my mind. When night falls, I will still have that feeling. The feeling of presence has never left. And no matter where I leave, no matter how much I change everything around me, that darkness, that obsession, will still remain in me.